The guard towers at Forward Operating Base Sentinel couldn't comprehend what emerged from the Hindu Kush Mountains that dawn. Through the morning mist of the Afghan wilderness, a lone figure appeared, pulling 5 unconscious Navy SEALs behind her, on improvised stretchers made from salvaged equipment and torn fabric, their bloodied forms secured with paracord, as she dragged them across the rocky terrain like a one-woman rescue convoy. But the impossible sight wasn't just 5 SEALs returning from what command had classified as a failed mission with total casualties. The impossible sight was that Sergeant First Class Sophia Blaze Carpenter had been officially declared killed in action 72 hours earlier, her dog tags already processed, her personal effects packed for shipment home to Ohio, and her memorial service scheduled for the following Tuesday. Yet here she stood at the main gate, this 5 feet 6 inches combat medic, who'd been written off as another casualty of an unforgiving war, proving that sometimes being underestimated becomes the greatest tactical advantage of all. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. 3 days earlier, the morning briefing at Forward Operating Base Sentinel had begun like any other routine intelligence gathering session. Captain Gregory Lawson stood before the assembled personnel in the main operations center, his weathered face reflecting the strain of 14 months commanding a forward position in one of Afghanistan's most contested regions. The mountains surrounding their base had claimed too many good soldiers, and every mission briefing carried the weight of decisions that could send people home in body bags or flag-draped coffins. Sophia Carpenter sat in the 3rd row, her medical kit positioned beside her chair with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. At 26, she had developed a reputation among the enlisted personnel as someone who could stabilize trauma wounds that left other medics shaking their heads. Her auburn hair was pulled back in regulation fashion, but her green eyes held an intensity that suggested she was processing information on multiple levels simultaneously. The other soldiers respected her clinical competence, but few understood the depth of tactical knowledge she had acquired during her deployment. Intelligence indicates increased Taliban activity in the Tarnak River Valley, Lawson announced, pointing to a topographical map that dominated the front wall. SEAL Team 7 will conduct reconnaissance of suspected weapons caches in grid squares 4 through 7. Medical support will be provided by Hospital Corfin First Class Williams from the primary aid station. Sophia looked up from her notebook, recognizing immediately that Williams lacked experience with high-altitude combat medicine and had never worked with SEAL teams in mountain terrain. The Tarnak River Valley presented unique challenges that required specialized knowledge of altitude sickness, cold weather injuries, and evacuation procedures from terrain, where helicopters couldn't land safely. She raised her hand with the careful deference that military protocol demanded. Sir, the elevation changes in that sector can cause rapid onset altitude sickness in wounded personnel. Standard evacuation protocols may need modification for casualties above 8,000 feet. Lawson glanced at her with the polite attention commanders showed when enlisted personnel offered technical observations. Thank you, Carpenter. We'll keep that in mind if complications arise. Williams has handled similar operations before. The dismissal stung, but Sophia had learned to expect institutional resistance to her expertise. Her personnel file documented advanced trauma training that exceeded requirements for her rank, specialized mountain medicine certification she had pursued during leave time, and language skills in Dari and Pashto that allowed her to communicate with local civilians. What her file didn't document was her comprehensive study of Taliban tactics, her analysis of evacuation failures from previous operations, and her development of medical protocols specifically designed for high-altitude combat scenarios. Lieutenant Monica Bell approached Sophia after the briefing, her expression carrying the careful neutrality of someone navigating competing institutional pressures. As the base intelligence officer, Bell understood the value of Sophia's tactical analysis, but also recognized the bureaucratic challenges of utilizing expertise that exceeded traditional role boundaries. Your point about altitude complications was valid, Bell said quietly, but you know how command feels about medics providing tactical assessments. Stay in your lane and let operations handle mission planning. Staying in her lane. The phrase that had defined Sophia's entire military career. Too knowledgeable for simple medical duties, too innovative for traditional protocols, too persistent for comfortable authority relationships. She had accepted these limitations for over a year, telling herself that supporting others was as valuable as leading them. But the Tarnak River Valley presented challenges that traditional approaches couldn't address effectively. Staff Sergeant Curtis Shaw monitored communications from his cramped bunker, surrounded by radio equipment that connected Forward Operating Base Sentinel to operations across the region. At 32, Shaw had developed an intuitive understanding of how communication patterns revealed tactical situations, recognizing when routine chatter suggested emerging problems and when silence indicated operations proceeding according to plan. His relationship with Sophia had evolved through shared night shifts and technical discussions that revealed her understanding of tactical communication exceeded official requirements. "Carpenter," Shaw called as she passed his bunker entrance. "Got a minute to look at some frequency analysis? I'm seeing patterns in local communications that don't match normal civilian activity." Sophia entered the dimly lit space, immediately recognizing the sophisticated monitoring equipment that Shaw used to track enemy communications. The displays showed signal strength, frequency patterns, and linguistic analysis that suggested coordinated military activity rather than routine civilian communication. Her months of studying Taliban communication protocols allowed her to interpret the data with accuracy that surprised even Shaw. "These transmissions are using code words that indicate weapons movement," she observed, pointing to the linguistic analysis display. "The timing suggests they're coordinating something significant in the next 24 to 48 hours. Shaw nodded grimly. "That's what I was thinking. Problem is, the intel shop says these frequencies are just local merchants coordinating supply runs. They don't want to hear about Taliban activity in sectors where we've got operations planned." The familiar pattern was emerging again, technical expertise being filtered through institutional assumptions that prioritized procedural compliance over tactical accuracy. Sophia studied the communication patterns with growing concern, recognizing coordination methods that suggested SEAL Team 7 was walking into a carefully prepared ambush. The enemy had somehow learned about the reconnaissance mission and was positioning forces to exploit terrain advantages that American planning hadn't fully considered. "Shaw, this intelligence needs to reach Lieutenant Commander Reed before SEAL Team 7 inserts. They're planning operations in exactly the areas where these communications suggest enemy preparation." Shaw's expression reflected the same institutional frustration that Sophia had encountered throughout her deployment. "Carpenter, you know the chain of command. Intelligence assessments go through Bell's office, then up to Captain Lawson, then maybe to Reed if they decide it's relevant. By the time this analysis reaches anyone who can act on it, SEAL Team 7 will already be in the field." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Corporal Dominic Titan Walsh, the SEAL Team 7 leader whose massive frame and quiet confidence had earned him respect throughout the base. At 28, Walsh had conducted more high-risk reconnaissance missions than most operators accomplished in entire careers, but his tactical approach emphasized preparation over improvisation, detailed planning over reactive adaptation. His presence in Shaw's communications bunker suggested he was seeking information that official briefings hadn't provided. "Shaw, I need an honest assessment of enemy activity in our operational area," Walsh said without preamble. "Something about this mission feels wrong, and I trust your analysis more than official intelligence reports." Sophia found herself in an unprecedented situation, possessing tactical intelligence that could save lives while lacking official authorization to share it. Military protocol demanded that she remain silent while Walsh received information through proper channels. But proper channels had consistently demonstrated reluctance to accept analysis that challenged established assumptions about enemy capabilities and American tactical advantages. "Corporal Walsh," she said carefully, "the communication patterns Staff Sergeant Shaw has identified suggest coordinated enemy activity in grid squares 4 through 7. The linguistic analysis indicates weapons positioning and personnel movement that could compromise your mission objectives." Walsh studied the displays with professional interest, recognizing immediately that the analysis exceeded routine intelligence gathering in both sophistication and accuracy. "Carpenter, where did you learn Taliban communication protocols well enough to interpret raw intercepts?" The question exposed the central contradiction of Sophia's military service. Her expertise existed because she had pursued knowledge that others considered inappropriate for someone of her rank and specialty. She had studied enemy tactics obsessively, learned local languages fluently, and developed analytical capabilities that exceeded official requirements. because she recognized that combat situations demanded comprehensive understanding rather than narrow specialization. Corporal, I learned it the same way I learned high-altitude medicine, mountain rescue techniques, and tactical evacuation procedures. Through preparation that other people considered excessive for someone of my assigned duties. Walsh exchanged glances with Shaw, both recognizing the institutional dynamic that kept valuable expertise from being utilized effectively. The military's strength lay in disciplined specialization and clear command structures, but those same strengths could become weaknesses when situations required innovative thinking and cross-functional competence. Carpenter, what's your assessment of our mission success probability based on this intelligence? The question forced Sophia to confront the gap between her analysis and official optimism about SEAL Team 7's capabilities. Standard planning assumed that superior training and equipment would compensate for enemy advantages in terrain knowledge and preparation time. But her analysis suggested that Taliban forces had identified American patterns and were exploiting them with tactical sophistication that exceeded previous encounters. Corporal, based on enemy communication patterns and terrain analysis, I assess your mission as high risk with significant probability of casualties unless operational parameters are modified to account for enemy preparation. The assessment hung in the cramped bunker like an indictment of institutional decision-making that prioritized confidence over caution, established procedures over adaptive thinking. Walsh absorbed the information with the professional calm of someone accustomed to operating with incomplete information and institutional constraints, but Sophia could see him processing implications that official briefings hadn't addressed. The next 18 hours unfolded with the inexorable momentum of military operations that combine careful planning with unpredictable execution. SEAL Team 7 departed Forward Operating Base Sentinel at 0400 hours, their insertion proceeding according to schedule, while Shaw's communication monitoring revealed increasing enemy coordination in their operational area. Sophia maintained her routine medical duties while tracking developments through official channels and unauthorized intelligence gathering that confirmed her worst assessments. At 1,347 hours, the first distress transmission crackled through Shaw's monitoring equipment with the unmistakable urgency of soldiers in immediate danger. Through tactical frequencies that weren't part of standard base communications, they heard Walsh's voice reporting contact with superior enemy forces and requesting immediate extraction support for multiple casualties. Base Actual, this is Neptune 7. We are under heavy fire from prepared positions, team leader down with critical wounds. 4 additional casualties requiring immediate medical evacuation. Our position is compromised and enemy forces are closing on our location. The transmission was broken by static and the distant sound of automatic weapons fire, but the message was devastatingly clear. Sophia's unauthorized intelligence analysis had proven accurate. SEAL Team 7 was trapped in precisely the kind of carefully coordinated ambush that Taliban communication intercepts had suggested, and now 5 men were dying because institutional procedures had prevented effective utilization of available intelligence. Captain Lawson's response came through official channels with the measured tone of someone making calculations between available resources and acceptable losses. Neptune 7, this is Base Actual. Weather conditions are deteriorating and your position is outside our normal extraction envelope. All available aircraft are committed to operations in other sectors. Engineering is working on alternative solutions, but you need to hold your position until assets become available. The response was tactically accurate and operationally useless. Hold position while outnumbered, treat wounds that required surgical intervention, and wait for resources that might not arrive in time. Sophia listened to this exchange with growing horror, knowing that she was hearing the institutional failures that would result in preventable deaths, because the system designed to protect soldiers was constrained by procedures that prioritized efficiency over effectiveness. Shaw met her eyes across the equipment displays, both recognizing the moment when following orders became complicity in disaster. Carpenter, is there anything we can do that official resources can't provide? The question exposed the fundamental choice that every soldier eventually faced between institutional loyalty and moral responsibility. Sophia possessed medical expertise that exceeded standard requirements, tactical knowledge that could guide rescue operations, and physical capabilities that months of unauthorized training had developed specifically for situations that others considered impossible. What she lacked was permission to use those capabilities when lives depended on them. Shaw, I can reach them. I know the terrain. I understand enemy movement patterns, and I have medical training that could stabilize their wounds for evacuation. The question is whether I'm willing to risk court-martial to save 5 men who are dying while we follow proper procedures." The silence that followed was filled with the background hum of radio equipment and the distant sounds of a military base conducting routine operations while 5 SEALs bled in the mountains. Shaw stared at his communication displays, recognizing that he was witnessing the moment when institutional requirements collided with individual conscience, when following orders meant accepting preventable deaths, and when being right about tactical assessment became secondary to being powerless within command structures. "Carpenter," he said finally, "I'll maintain communication support for any operation you decide to conduct. And I'll make sure the official record reflects that you acted with the best available intelligence when command resources were insufficient to address the tactical situation." Sophia looked at her medical equipment, at the specialized gear she had quietly acquired for situations that others had dismissed as impossible, at the tactical knowledge that months of unauthorized preparation had developed. The choice was stark: remain within assigned boundaries while men died, or exceed institutional authority to accomplish missions that official resources couldn't complete. Outside the communications bunker, Forward Operating Base Sentinel continued its routine operations, unaware that one of their medics was about to undertake an unauthorized rescue mission that would either save 5 lives or end her military career. In the Hindu Kush Mountains, SEAL Team 7 waited for help that official channels couldn't provide, while enemy forces consolidated positions that intelligence failures had allowed them to establish. The stage was set for a confrontation between individual capability and institutional limitation, between moral responsibility and procedural compliance, between the soldier Sophia had been trained to be and the soldier she had prepared herself to become. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The decision crystallized in Sophia's mind with the brutal clarity that combat situations demanded. Standing in Shaw's communications bunker, listening to the increasing desperation in Walsh's transmissions, she realized that everything she had prepared for during months of unauthorized training was converging into this single moment. The specialized medical equipment in her personal locker, the terrain maps she had studied obsessively, the physical conditioning that others had questioned. All of it had been building toward a scenario where official resources failed and individual initiative became the difference between life and death. "Shaw, I need 30 minutes to gather equipment and plan a route. Can you maintain communication with Neptune 7 and track enemy movement patterns?" Shaw's fingers moved across his control panels with practiced efficiency. "Already on it. I'm monitoring 3 Taliban frequencies and tracking their coordination attempts. Looks like they're consolidating around Neptune 7's position, but they're not expecting rescue attempts from the southeast approach. That might give you a window." Sophia moved with methodical precision, her mind shifting into the tactical framework she had developed through countless mental rehearsals. Her personal equipment cache contained specialized gear that exceeded standard medic allocations. Advanced trauma supplies designed for battlefield surgery, lightweight mountaineering equipment rated for technical climbs, and communication devices that could operate across multiple frequency bands simultaneously. Each item had been selected for scenarios that official doctrine considered beyond the scope of medical personnel. Major Lindsay Crawford intercepted her in the equipment storage area, the base medical officer's expression reflecting suspicion at Sophia's unusual activity during off-duty hours. "Carpenter, what's the nature of your equipment requisition? These supplies aren't authorized for routine medical duties." The confrontation forced Sophia to balance military honesty with operational security. Crawford was a competent medical officer, but she had never demonstrated understanding of tactical medicine beyond conventional boundaries. Her medical philosophy emphasized evacuation to proper facilities rather than extended field treatment, stabilization for transport rather than definitive care under combat conditions. "Ma'am, I'm conducting personal equipment maintenance and resupply. Some items require replacement due to environmental degradation." The explanation was technically accurate while avoiding details that would trigger institutional intervention. Crawford studied the advanced surgical equipment and mountaineering gear with growing concern. "Carpenter, this equipment loadout exceeds anything required for your assigned duties. I need a more specific explanation of your intended use for these materials." The question struck at the heart of Sophia's unauthorized preparation. How could she explain that she had been developing capabilities that the military hadn't requested because she had recognized situations where those capabilities might become essential? How could she justify maintaining readiness for missions that others considered impossible without acknowledging that she had been preparing to exceed her assigned role? "Ma'am, I believe in comprehensive preparation for situations that might exceed standard parameters. This equipment represents my commitment to being ready for whatever medical challenges our operational environment might present." Crawford's expression shifted from suspicion to disapproval. "Carpenter, your job is to provide routine medical support within established protocols. This level of specialized equipment suggests you're preparing for operations that are beyond your authority and outside your competence. I need you to explain exactly what scenarios you think require this kind of preparation." The conversation was interrupted by Corporal Meredith Fox, approaching with urgent communications equipment. "Ma'am, Colonel Hunt is requesting immediate consultation regarding medical evacuation capabilities for complex trauma cases in mountainous terrain. He specifically mentioned needing expertise in high-altitude medicine and technical rescue procedures." The timing created an unexpected opportunity. Crawford's attention shifted to institutional requirements. While Sophia recognized that senior command was beginning to acknowledge the limitations of conventional medical support for the current tactical situation, Colonel Philip Hunt's request suggested that official channels were finally recognizing the need for specialized capabilities that exceeded routine medical protocols. "Carpenter," Crawford said, her tone becoming more professional, "report to Colonel Hunt's office immediately. Apparently, your additional training in mountain medicine has become relevant to current operations." Sophia secured her equipment and moved toward the command complex, recognizing that institutional acknowledgement of her expertise was arriving too late to help SEAL Team 7 through conventional channels. Hunt's request for consultation would take hours to process through proper military bureaucracy while Walsh and his team bled in the mountains. By the time official authorization emerged for unconventional medical support, the tactical window for successful rescue would have closed. Colonel Hunt's office reflected the careful balance between military authority and tactical pragmatism that defined effective forward operating base command. Maps covered every wall surface, displaying terrain features, enemy activity patterns, and friendly force positions with the detailed precision that successful operations required. Hunt himself embodied the professional competence that earned respect from subordinates, while maintaining institutional credibility with superior command structures. "Sergeant Carpenter, I understand you have specialized training in high-altitude combat medicine and technical rescue procedures. Current operations have encountered complications that exceed our standard medical support capabilities." Hunt's acknowledgement carried weight that months of institutional dismissal had failed to provide. For the first time, senior command was recognizing that Sophia's unauthorized preparation had developed expertise that conventional resources couldn't match. The validation was professionally satisfying while being operationally irrelevant to the immediate crisis. "Sir, what specific medical challenges are you encountering that require specialized intervention?" Hunt consulted classified communication summaries before responding with carefully measured information. SEAL Team 7 has sustained multiple casualties in terrain that prevents conventional evacuation. We need assessment of alternative medical support options that might stabilize wounded personnel until extraction becomes feasible. The briefing revealed that senior command understood the tactical situation while remaining constrained by institutional procedures that prevented rapid response. Hunt was seeking expert consultation rather than authorizing immediate action, professional advice rather than operational deployment. The gap between recognition and utilization remained as wide as ever. "Sir, high-altitude trauma presents unique challenges that require immediate intervention. Delayed evacuation increases mortality rates exponentially when combined with altitude effects and environmental exposure. Standard protocols assume evacuation within 60 minutes, but mountain terrain can extend that timeline beyond medical viability." Hunt absorbed the information with professional interest. "Carpenter, what would be required to provide extended medical support in the field, assuming conventional evacuation remains unavailable for extended periods?" The question opened possibilities that official channels hadn't previously considered. Sophia realized that she could provide tactical recommendations that might eventually authorize the kind of rescue operation that immediate circumstances demanded, but eventually would arrive too late for Walsh and his team, who needed intervention within hours rather than days. "Sir, extended field medical support would require specialized equipment, advanced trauma training, and personnel capable of operating independently in hostile territory. The medic would need mountaineering skills for terrain navigation, combat experience for tactical movement, and surgical capabilities for definitive treatment rather than just stabilization. Hunt's expression reflected growing understanding of the gap between available resources and operational requirements. "Carpenter, do we have personnel with those combined qualifications?" The moment demanded absolute honesty about capabilities that existed outside official recognition. Sophia could acknowledge her preparation while maintaining institutional protocols, or she could reveal the extent of her unauthorized development in ways that might change how command understood available resources. "Sir, I have developed those qualifications through additional training and personal preparation. I am qualified to provide extended medical support in mountain terrain under combat conditions, but my deployment would exceed standard protocols for medical personnel." Hunt studied her personnel file with renewed attention, recognizing for the first time that her documented competence represented only a fraction of her actual capabilities. "Carpenter, explain exactly what additional training you have pursued and how it relates to current operational requirements." The explanation revealed the comprehensive nature of Sophia's unauthorized preparation. Advanced trauma surgery learned through civilian emergency medicine programs, mountaineering certification obtained during leave periods, tactical movement training conducted with special operations personnel, and language skills developed through immersion with local populations. Each capability had been acquired independently, but together they created competence that exceeded anything available through official channels. "Sir, I recognize that forward operating base medical support might encounter situations that exceeded conventional protocols. I prepared myself to provide medical care under conditions that standard training doesn't address." Hunt absorbed the information while calculating institutional implications of deploying personnel beyond their assigned roles. Military effectiveness required balancing individual initiative with command authority, utilizing available capabilities while maintaining disciplinary standards. Sophia's preparation had created possibilities that official planning hadn't anticipated. "Carpenter, current tactical situation may require unconventional approaches to personnel utilization. However, any deployment outside standard protocols would need specific authorization and detailed mission planning." The response reflected institutional recognition balanced by procedural caution. Hunt understood that Sophia possessed capabilities that could address current problems, but he remained constrained by command structures that required formal authorization for unconventional operations. Authorization that would take time Walsh and his team didn't have. Sophia recognized the familiar pattern of institutional acknowledgement followed by procedural delay. Her expertise was finally being appreciated, but appreciation didn't translate into immediate action when lives hung in the balance. The conversation would continue through proper channels while SEAL Team 7 died waiting for help that bureaucracy prevented from reaching them. "Sir, I request permission to prepare a detailed operational plan for extended medical support in mountain terrain. If authorized, I could provide immediate assistance to personnel who cannot be reached through conventional evacuation procedures." Hunt's approval came with institutional caveats that revealed both opportunity and limitation. "Granted, Carpenter. Prepare comprehensive plans for review and potential implementation. However, understand that any actual deployment would require approval from regional command and coordination with multiple support elements." The authorization provided official recognition for planning while maintaining barriers to immediate action. Sophia could develop operational proposals that might eventually address future situations while being prevented from addressing the current emergency that demanded immediate response. The institutional machinery was finally acknowledging her capabilities while preventing their utilization when they were most needed. Leaving Hunt's office, Sophia recognized that official channels had progressed from dismissal to acknowledgement, but acknowledgement remained insufficient when people were dying. She possessed the skills, equipment, and knowledge necessary to reach SEAL Team 7, but lacked the institutional permission that military discipline demanded. The choice remained between following orders while men died, or exceeding authority to accomplish missions that official resources couldn't complete. Shaw met her outside the command complex with communication updates that eliminated any remaining doubt about the tactical situation. "Carpenter, intercepted transmissions indicate Taliban forces are moving to surround Neptune 7's position. Weather conditions are deteriorating, which will make helicopter extraction impossible even if aircraft become available. Command is running out of time and options." The information confirmed that conventional rescue was becoming impossible while unconventional rescue remained unauthorized. Sophia stared at the mountains that concealed 5 wounded SEALs, recognizing that her months of preparation had led to this moment of decision between institutional compliance and moral responsibility. "I'm going to get them. Official authorization isn't coming in time, and they'll be dead before bureaucracy finishes processing requests for unconventional operations." Shaw nodded grimly. "I'll maintain communication support and provide cover for your departure. How long do you need to reach their position?" The question forced Sophia to commit to a course of action that would either validate her unauthorized preparation or end her military career. But watching men die while possessing the capability to save them felt like a greater betrayal than violating regulations that prevented effective action. 6 hours to reach them, assuming enemy activity doesn't force route changes. After that, medical stabilization and movement planning depending on their conditions. Shaw extended a hand that carried the weight of shared commitment to principles that transcended institutional boundaries. "Good hunting, Carpenter. Bring them home." The handshake sealed a pact between soldiers who understood that sometimes the most important orders were the ones they gave themselves when official command failed to meet moral responsibilities. Sophia moved toward the perimeter with equipment that months of preparation had assembled for exactly this scenario, while Shaw returned to his communications bunker to provide unauthorized support for a rescue mission that regulations prohibited but conscience demanded. The Hindu Kush Mountains waited in the growing darkness, concealing 5 wounded men whose lives depended on a combat medic who had been told she wasn't qualified for the mission she was about to undertake. Behind her, Forward Operating Base Sentinel continued its routine operations, unaware that one of their medics was crossing from authorized duty into unauthorized territory, where individual capability would be tested against impossible odds and institutional limitations would be challenged by personal determination to leave no soldier behind. The Afghan night consumed Sophia like a living entity as she moved through terrain that existed in the space between military maps and hostile reality. The Hindu Kush Mountains rose around her in jagged silhouettes against star-filled sky, their ancient peaks indifferent to the human conflicts that played out across their slopes. Her route followed dry creek beds and animal paths that wouldn't appear on satellite imagery, approaches she had identified during months of topographical study that others had dismissed as academic curiosity. Every step demanded calculations that her unauthorized training had prepared her to make. The specialized boots she wore distributed weight across rocky surfaces while providing traction on loose scree that could betray her position through noise or movement. Her pack contained medical equipment that exceeded standard load requirements, but the weight distribution system she had developed allowed sustained movement through terrain that would exhaust soldiers carrying conventional gear. The first Taliban checkpoint appeared at 0237 hours, positioned exactly where her intelligence analysis had predicted enemy forces would establish observation posts. 2 fighters maintained watch over the primary approach route while a third monitored radio communications that connected their position to larger coordination networks. Their placement confirmed that enemy tactical planning had anticipated rescue attempts through conventional approaches, but hadn't considered infiltration routes that required specialized navigation skills. Sophia studied their positions through night vision equipment that her personal procurement had acquired specifically for independent operations. The guards showed professional discipline in their watch procedures, but their attention focused on vehicle approaches and helicopter landing zones rather than individual movement through difficult terrain. Their tactical assumption was that American rescue attempts would rely on technological advantages rather than individual infiltration capabilities. The bypass route she selected required technical climbing skills that standard military training didn't provide. A narrow ledge system allowed movement around the checkpoint while remaining concealed from observation, but demanded balance and nerve that months of physical preparation had developed. Each hand and foot placement had to be precise, while carrying equipment that shifted center of gravity in ways that could prove fatal if movement became uncontrolled. "Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel," she whispered into her communications equipment using the call sign she had established with Shaw, passing checkpoint Alpha without detection. Enemy positions confirmed as predicted. Continuing toward objective. Shaw's response crackled through her earpiece with professional calm that masked institutional violations they were both committing. "Guardian Angel, copy your position." Neptune 7 last transmission indicated worsening medical conditions. Time is becoming critical factor. The information added urgency to movement that already demanded maximum capability. Walsh and his team were deteriorating while she navigated obstacles that conventional rescue couldn't address. Her medical expertise told her that trauma injuries combined with altitude effects created mortality curves that measured survival in hours rather than days. Every minute spent reaching them reduced the probability that her intervention could reverse damage that was accumulating beyond surgical repair. The second obstacle emerged at 0341 hours when her route intersected with Taliban patrol patterns that intelligence analysis hadn't identified. 4 fighters moved through her planned approach corridor with tactical spacing that suggested professional military training rather than militia improvisation. Their equipment included night vision capabilities and communication gear that connected them to coordination networks monitoring American rescue attempts. Sophia pressed herself against rock formations that provided concealment while calculating alternative routes that would avoid contact without adding hours to her movement timeline. The patrol's path blocked her direct approach to Neptune 7's position, but detouring around their coverage area would delay her arrival beyond the medical window that trauma victims could survive. The solution required skills that belonged more to special operations than medical personnel. She identified a concealment position that would allow the patrol to pass while remaining undetected, then continued movement using techniques that emphasized stealth over speed. Her small stature became an advantage in terrain that rewarded careful movement over physical strength, allowing approaches that larger soldiers couldn't attempt. At 0428 hours, she reached the ridgeline that overlooked Neptune 7's position. Through her observation equipment, the tactical situation became devastatingly clear. Walsh and his team had established a defensive position in terrain that provided cover from enemy fire while preventing helicopter extraction. Their location offered tactical advantages for holding ground, but created medical disadvantages that made survival dependent on intervention that conventional resources couldn't provide. The 5 SEALs were distributed across the position in ways that revealed both their tactical competence and their medical desperation. Walsh maintained security, while obviously struggling with wounds that required immediate attention. 3 team members showed signs of unconsciousness that suggested severe trauma or blood loss. The 5th man moved with deliberate care that indicated painful but non-critical injuries. Neptune 7, this is Guardian Angel approaching your position from the northeast. She transmitted through encrypted communications. Medical assistance is approximately 15 minutes away. What's your current tactical situation? Walsh's response carried amazement mixed with professional skepticism. Guardian Angel, we've been monitoring all base traffic and haven't received notification of any rescue operations in our sector. Identify yourself and your authorization for this mission. The question struck at the heart of her unauthorized deployment. She possessed the medical capabilities that Walsh's team needed while lacking the institutional permission that military protocol demanded. Her presence represented individual initiative exceeding official approval, competence operating outside authorized boundaries. Neptune 7, I'm Sergeant First Class Carpenter from Forward Operating Base Sentinel. I'm conducting unauthorized medical support because official evacuation assets aren't available within your survival timeline. My medical qualifications exceed standard requirements, and I've prepared specifically for high-altitude trauma situations. The silence that followed was filled with tactical calculations as Walsh processed the implications of unauthorized rescue attempts. His team needed medical intervention that official channels couldn't provide, but accepting help from unauthorized personnel created command responsibility issues that could affect his career if they survived. Guardian Angel, what medical capabilities are you bringing to this position? Sophia's response revealed the comprehensive nature of her preparation. Advanced trauma surgery equipment, blood replacement products, pain management pharmaceuticals, and evacuation supplies for multiple casualties. I'm qualified to provide definitive medical care, rather than just stabilization for transport. Walsh's tactical assessment overcame institutional concerns as he recognized that survival took precedence over procedural compliance. Guardian Angel, approach with caution. We have enemy observers on ridge lines to the south and west. Medical situation is critical for 3 team members. The final approach to Neptune 7's position tested every aspect of Sophia's tactical movement training. Enemy forces maintained observation posts that could detect careless movement, while terrain features limited concealment options. She used techniques that emphasized patience over speed, moving during natural sound cover, and using shadows that concealed her approach from enemy observation. At 0456 hours, she reached the SEAL team's defensive perimeter and immediately understood why conventional evacuation had failed. The position occupied a narrow ledge system that provided excellent defensive coverage while being completely inaccessible to helicopter rescue. Vehicle evacuation was impossible due to terrain features, and carrying wounded personnel through the approaches she had used would require multiple trips that enemy forces would detect and interdict. Walsh met her approach with professional wariness that dissolved into relief as he recognized the medical equipment she carried. "Carpenter, I don't know how you got here, but we need immediate medical intervention for 3 critical casualties." The first patient was Petty Officer Adrian Burke, unconscious with multiple gunshot wounds to the torso that had penetrated body armor at close range. His breathing was shallow and rapid, while his pulse was weak but regular, indicating shock from blood loss and possible internal organ damage. Field dressings had controlled external bleeding, but internal injuries required surgical intervention that exceeded battlefield first aid capabilities. "How long has he been unconscious?" Sophia asked while establishing IV access and beginning fluid replacement therapy. Her hands moved with competence that months of advanced training had developed, working efficiently despite tactical constraints that limited her movement and equipment options. "Approximately 2 hours, Walsh replied while maintaining security watch. "Lost consciousness gradually after we applied pressure dressings. Pulse has been weakening despite our first aid efforts." Sophia's medical assessment revealed injuries that would challenge hospital emergency rooms, let alone battlefield conditions. Burke's abdominal wounds suggested liver or spleen damage that required immediate surgical repair. His blood pressure indicated ongoing internal bleeding that fluid replacement could only temporarily address. Without definitive surgical intervention within the next few hours, he would die regardless of her field treatment capabilities. The second critical casualty was hospital corpsman Jared Stone, ironic given his medical training but devastating for the team's self-treatment capabilities. Shrapnel from enemy grenades had caused multiple lacerations and embedded fragments in his right leg and lower torso. His consciousness was intermittent, suggesting possible head trauma or severe pain that exceeded his tolerance levels. Stone tried to treat the others before losing effectiveness, Walsh explained while Sophia examined the corpsman's wounds. He managed to stabilize Burke and Glenn before his own injuries overwhelmed him. Stone's medical condition required different intervention approaches than Burke's trauma. The shrapnel wounds needed cleaning and fragment removal to prevent infection, while his head injury demanded neurological monitoring that field conditions made difficult. His medical knowledge made him an asset for treating other casualties, but only if his own condition could be stabilized sufficiently to restore cognitive function. The third critical patient was Petty Officer First Class Tristan Glenn, whose leg wounds had resulted in arterial damage that continued bleeding despite multiple attempts at pressure control. His consciousness remained intact, but his pallor and weakness indicated blood loss that approached life-threatening levels. His tactical awareness remained functional, allowing him to provide security support while requiring immediate medical attention. "Carpenter," Glenn said through gritted teeth, "I can still shoot, but I'm losing blood faster than we can replace it. How much time do I have before this becomes academic?" Sophia's honest assessment reflected medical realities that tactical optimism couldn't change. "Glenn, you've lost approximately 30% of your blood volume. I can control the arterial bleeding and provide replacement fluids, but you need surgical vascular repair within 6 hours, or the blood loss becomes irreversible." The remaining 2 team members, Seaman Colton Boyd and Walsh himself, had sustained wounds that were painful but not immediately life-threatening. Boyd's shoulder injury limited his mobility but didn't compromise vital functions, while Walsh's leg wound allowed continued movement despite obvious discomfort. Their conditions required medical attention but could wait until the critical patients received definitive care. Sophia spread her medical equipment across the defensive position, transforming the tactical location into an improvised field hospital that exceeded anything the SEAL team had expected from a rescue operation. Her preparation had anticipated exactly this scenario: multiple trauma patients requiring surgical intervention in hostile territory without evacuation support. "Walsh, I need to perform emergency surgery on Burke to control internal bleeding. This will require approximately 1 hour, during which my attention will be completely focused on medical procedures. Can your tactical situation support that kind of time commitment? Walsh calculated enemy activity patterns against medical requirements, recognizing that survival depended on accepting tactical risks that normal operations would avoid. Carpenter, we can provide security for your medical operations. Do what you need to do to save them. The authorization represented institutional trust transcending official procedures. Walsh was betting his team's tactical security on a combat medic whose unauthorized presence violated every regulation while providing capabilities that official resources couldn't match. Her medical competence would be tested against conditions that exceeded anything her training had simulated. Sophia began emergency surgical procedures under conditions that would challenge experienced trauma surgeons in fully equipped operating rooms. Working by artificial lighting that had to remain concealed from enemy observation, using instruments that had been designed for field conditions but pushed beyond their intended applications, she initiated medical interventions that represented the gap between textbook medicine and battlefield reality. Burke's abdominal surgery required precision that tactical constraints made nearly impossible. Her hands worked inside his body cavity while enemy forces maintained positions that could detect careless movement or excessive noise. The procedure demanded complete focus while maintaining tactical awareness, medical expertise while accepting risks that hospital environments would never tolerate. Burke's liver has a grade 3 laceration that I can repair, but he's also got splenic damage that's more complex, she reported while working. I can control the immediate bleeding, but he'll need definitive surgical repair within 24 hours. Walsh absorbed the information while maintaining perimeter security. Carpenter, can you stabilize him for extended movement? We're going to have to carry everyone out of here, and the terrain doesn't allow for gentle transport. The question highlighted the fundamental challenge of her rescue mission. Medical stabilization was only the first step in a process that required moving 5 wounded men through hostile territory to safety. Her preparation would be tested not just by surgical competence, but by the physical and tactical demands of evacuation under impossible conditions. Burke's surgery demanded precision that battlefield conditions made nearly impossible, but Sophia's hands moved with competence that months of trauma training had developed specifically for situations where perfection meant survival and failure meant death. Working inside his abdominal cavity while maintaining tactical awareness of enemy positions, she located the liver laceration that was causing internal bleeding and began repairs that would either save his life or represent the limits of field medicine under combat constraints. Liver repair is holding, she reported while suturing damaged tissue with techniques that belonged more in operating rooms than mountain defensive positions. But his blood pressure is still dropping. I need to address the splenic damage before we lose him entirely. Walsh maintained security while monitoring her progress, recognizing that their tactical situation was becoming more precarious with each minute spent in stationary positions. Carpenter, enemy activity is increasing on the surrounding ridgelines. How much more time do you need for surgical procedures? The question forced Sophia to balance medical requirements against tactical realities. Burke's spleen showed damage that could prove fatal without proper repair, but extended surgery would expose the entire team to enemy detection and potential annihilation. Her medical judgment suggested that partial repair might provide sufficient stabilization for movement, even if definitive treatment would be required later. Give me 20 more minutes to control the splenic bleeding, then I can move to the other casualties. Burke will be transportable but critical. Stone's treatment required different approaches than Burke's emergency surgery. The shrapnel embedded in his leg and torso needed extraction to prevent infection, while his head injury demanded neurological assessment that could determine whether his medical knowledge remained functionally available. His consciousness had improved during the hour she'd spent treating Burke, suggesting that his cognitive impairment might be temporary rather than permanent. Stone, I need you to tell me your name, rank, and current date, Sophia said while examining his wounds for foreign objects that required removal. Your head injury may have affected your memory or judgment, and I need to know if you can assist with medical procedures. Stone's response came slowly but accurately. Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Jared Stone, October 15th, Forward Operating Base Sentinel. My head feels like someone used it for target practice, but I can think clearly enough to help with the others. His cognitive assessment suggested that concussion effects were mild enough to allow continued function as a medical assistant. Stone's training would be invaluable for treating multiple casualties while maintaining tactical security, but only if his physical condition could be stabilized sufficiently to allow sustained activity. The shrapnel extraction required steady hands and careful technique to avoid causing additional tissue damage. Each metal fragment had to be located, isolated, and removed while controlling bleeding and preventing contamination. Stone remained conscious throughout the procedure, providing medical observations that confirmed his cognitive function remained intact despite obvious pain. Stone, I'm removing fragments from your leg first, then we'll address your torso wounds. Your medical expertise is needed for the other casualties, so we're prioritizing getting you functional rather than completely treated. Glenn's arterial repair presented the most complex technical challenge of the 3 critical patients. His femoral artery had sustained damage that required vascular surgery techniques that exceeded standard battlefield medicine. Without proper repair, continued bleeding would prove fatal within hours, despite pressure dressings and fluid replacement. Glenn, this procedure is going to hurt significantly, but I need you to remain still during the vascular repair. Any movement could damage the artery further and make bleeding impossible to control. Glenn's response reflected the mental toughness that special operations training had developed. Carpenter, do whatever you need to do. I'd rather hurt now than bleed out later. The arterial repair demanded techniques that Sophia had learned through civilian emergency medicine training that exceeded military requirements. Working with surgical instruments designed for field conditions, she isolated the damaged vessel and began repairs that would either restore circulation or result in complications that could cost Glenn his leg. Vascular repair is holding, she announced after 40 minutes of precise work. Circulation is restored, but this repair won't tolerate rough handling during movement. Glenn needs to be transported carefully to prevent disrupting the surgical site. Boyd's shoulder injury and Walsh's leg wound required attention that was routine compared to the surgical procedures she had completed on the critical patients. Cleaning and dressing their wounds while administering pain management medication that would allow continued function without compromising their tactical effectiveness. Walsh, your leg wound is stable but will limit your mobility during extended movement. Boyd's shoulder injury affects his dominant arm, which will reduce his combat effectiveness but won't prevent him from assisting with casualty evacuation. With all 5 patients stabilized to the extent that field conditions allowed, Sophia turned her attention to the tactical challenge that represented the most dangerous aspect of her unauthorized rescue mission. Moving 5 wounded men through hostile territory to forward operating base Sentinel would require improvised equipment, careful route planning, and physical endurance that would test every aspect of her preparation. Walsh, I need to construct evacuation stretchers for the 3 critical patients. Burke, Stone, and Glenn can't walk the distance required, and the terrain won't allow conventional stretcher carrying by multiple personnel. Walsh studied the equipment she had brought while calculating movement requirements against available materials. Carpenter, what kind of stretcher system are you planning? We've got limited personnel for carrying wounded, and the terrain includes sections that will require technical climbing. Sophia's response revealed preparation that had anticipated exactly this scenario. I brought lightweight stretcher frames that can be configured for single-person transport. The system uses a harness that distributes weight across my frame while allowing movement through difficult terrain. The stretcher construction required engineering skills that exceeded medical training, but Sophia's months of equipment modification had prepared her for situations where standard gear proved inadequate. Using lightweight aluminum frames, specialized fabric, and attachment systems that she had designed specifically for solo casualty evacuation, she created transport systems that could move unconscious patients through terrain that would challenge healthy soldiers. These stretchers attach to my pack frame and distribute weight through a harness system that allows me to carry patients while maintaining balance and mobility. I can transport 1 critical patient at a time, while the walking wounded provide security and assistance. Walsh absorbed the implications of single-person casualty evacuation through hostile territory. Carpenter, you're talking about making 3 separate trips to move all the critical patients. That's approximately 18 hours of movement through terrain where enemy forces are actively hunting for us. The assessment was tactically accurate and operationally sobering. Sophia's rescue mission was expanding from unauthorized medical intervention to extended combat operations that would test her capabilities beyond anything her training had simulated. Each trip would expose her to enemy detection while leaving patients vulnerable during her absence. Walsh, I'll move Burke first since his condition is most critical. Stone and Glenn can provide basic security while I'm transporting him to a safe rally point approximately halfway to base. Then I'll return for the second patient while you and Boyd provide overwatch. The plan required tactical coordination that exceeded normal medic responsibilities while demanding physical endurance that would challenge special operations personnel. Walsh recognized that accepting Sophia's proposal meant trusting their survival to someone whose capabilities exceeded official recognition but remained untested under extended combat conditions. Carpenter, this evacuation plan puts enormous responsibility on your individual capabilities. Are you certain you can sustain this level of physical and tactical performance for the time required? Sophia's response reflected confidence built through months of preparation that others had dismissed as excessive. Walsh, I've been training specifically for scenarios where conventional evacuation fails and individual capability becomes the determining factor for mission success. I'm ready for this. The first evacuation phase began at 0347 hours with Burke secured in the transport system that would test both Sophia's engineering modifications and her physical conditioning. His unconscious weight distributed across her frame through the harness created a burden that demanded constant adjustment of balance and movement technique while maintaining tactical awareness of enemy positions. Movement through the initial terrain challenged every aspect of her preparation. The rocky approaches that had concealed her infiltration became obstacles that threatened to destabilize her balance while carrying Burke's additional weight. Each step required calculations that balanced speed against security, progress against exposure to enemy observation. Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel beginning casualty evacuation. She transmitted through communications equipment that Shaw monitored from forward operating base Sentinel. Moving critical patient toward Rally Point Alpha. Estimated time for first phase is 3 hours. Shaw's response carried professional concern mixed with institutional anxiety about the unauthorized operation he was supporting. Guardian Angel, be advised that Command is beginning to ask questions about your absence from assigned duties. How long before you need official cover for your activities? The question highlighted the institutional complications that her rescue mission was creating. While she focused on medical and tactical challenges, Shaw was managing bureaucratic problems that could result in court-martial proceedings if her unauthorized activities were discovered before she could demonstrate their success. Base Actual, I need approximately 12 more hours to complete casualty evacuation. After that, results will speak for themselves regarding the necessity of unauthorized intervention. The movement toward Rally Point Alpha tested Sophia's navigation skills as much as her physical endurance. Carrying Burke's weight while avoiding enemy patrols required route modifications that added distance and complexity to terrain that was already challenging under optimal conditions. Her small stature became an advantage in concealment while creating disadvantages in carrying capacity that she had to overcome through superior technique and determination. At 0628 hours, she encountered the obstacle that would define the success or failure of her evacuation mission. A Taliban patrol had established a checkpoint directly across her planned route to Rally Point Alpha, positioning 4 fighters with overlapping fields of observation that made bypass attempts extremely dangerous. Their placement suggested intelligence about American rescue operations that exceeded normal battlefield awareness. Sophia studied their positions while calculating alternatives that wouldn't compromise Burke's medical condition or expose her to detection that would result in combat she couldn't win while carrying a casualty. The patrol's tactical placement blocked all direct routes while forcing longer approaches that would exceed Burke's survival timeline. The solution required tactical innovation that combined her medical knowledge with combat skills that exceeded standard medic training. Burke's unconscious condition made him impossible to wake for cooperative movement, but also made him unaware of tactical risks that conscious patients might resist. She could attempt concealment approaches that would terrify alert casualties while being acceptable for unconscious transport. "Walsh, this is Guardian Angel at Checkpoint Bravo," she transmitted quietly. "Enemy patrol is blocking direct route to Rally Point Alpha. I'm going to attempt bypass using concealment approach that will add approximately 1 hour to movement time." Walsh's response reflected tactical understanding combined with medical concern. "Guardian Angel, Burke's condition allows for extended transport time, but don't take unnecessary risks. We need you to complete the mission. not become another casualty requiring rescue. The bypass attempt would test every aspect of Sophia's tactical movement training under conditions that exceeded anything her preparation had simulated. Carrying an unconscious patient through terrain that required stealth and precision while avoiding enemy detection that would result in combat engagement she couldn't survive. Her months of unauthorized training were converging into minutes that would determine whether individual preparation could overcome institutional limitations when lives hung in the balance. The bypass route Sophia selected required movement through terrain that challenged the fundamental principles of tactical concealment while carrying an unconscious casualty. The narrow ravine system that curved around the Taliban checkpoint demanded precise footwork across loose rock that could create noise signatures detectable from hundreds of meters away. Each step with Burke's additional weight had to be calculated for stability, silence, and speed, while maintaining awareness of enemy positions that could detect careless movement. Her small frame became a crucial advantage in the confined space of the ravine, allowing movement through passages that would be impossible for larger soldiers carrying equivalent loads. The specialized harness system distributed Burke's weight in ways that kept her center of gravity low, while permitting the careful balance required for technical movement across unstable surfaces. At 0712 hours, she reached the critical juncture where the ravine system intersected with open ground that had to be crossed to reach Rally Point Alpha. The exposure time would be approximately 4 minutes of movement across terrain visible from multiple enemy observation positions. Burke's unconscious condition made him unable to assist with concealment techniques, requiring her to provide complete camouflage for both of them while maintaining movement speed. Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel approaching Rally Point Alpha. She transmitted through communications equipment that Shaw monitored with growing anxiety about her extended absence from official duties. First casualty transport proceeding on schedule despite tactical complications. Shaw's response carried institutional warning mixed with personal concern. Guardian Angel, Colonel Hunt has been asking questions about your current location. I've provided cover explanations, but you need to complete this mission soon or risk official intervention. The information added bureaucratic pressure to tactical challenges that already tested her capabilities beyond standard requirements. While she focused on enemy evasion and casualty transport, institutional machinery was creating complications that could result in official termination of her rescue mission before she could demonstrate its necessity. The movement across open ground required techniques that belonged more to special operations infiltration than medical evacuation procedures. Using natural terrain features for concealment while maintaining steady progress, Sophia crossed the exposed area in 3 minutes and 47 seconds without triggering enemy detection. Burke remained stable throughout the movement, his unconscious condition actually providing advantages for stealth transport that conscious patients couldn't match. Rally Point Alpha occupied a concealed position that provided tactical security while allowing communication with both forward operating Base Sentinel and Neptune 7's defensive location. The natural rock formations offered protection from observation while creating microclimates that would help maintain Burke's body temperature during extended exposure to mountain conditions. Sophia established Burke in a secure position with medical monitoring equipment that would alert her to changes in his condition while she returned for the second casualty. His vital signs remained stable but critical, requiring definitive surgical care that only hospital facilities could provide. Her field treatment had bought time, but time was a limited resource that was depleting with each hour of delayed evacuation. Walsh, this is Guardian Angel at Rally Point Alpha, she transmitted to the SEAL team's position. Burke is stable and secured. Beginning return movement for second casualty transport. Estimated arrival time is 45 minutes. Walsh's response reflected tactical awareness of their deteriorating situation. Quote, Guardian Angel, enemy activity has increased in our sector. They seem to be conducting systematic searches for our position. Stone's condition has improved enough for limited movement assistance, but Glenn's vascular repair is showing signs of bleeding. The information forced Sophia to recalculate evacuation priorities based on medical urgency rather than planned sequence. Glenn's arterial repair was more fragile than Burke's surgical sites, making him vulnerable to complications that could prove fatal if transport was delayed. Medical logic demanded that she retrieve Glenn next, despite tactical complications that his condition might create during movement. The return journey to Neptune 7's position tested Sophia's endurance in ways that her physical preparation had anticipated but never fully simulated. Moving without casualty burden allowed faster progress, but also removed the tactical justification for careful movement that carrying wounded provided. She had to balance speed against concealment while conserving energy for the demanding casualty transport that would follow. At 0843 hours, she encountered evidence of Taliban search operations that confirmed Walsh's assessment of increasing enemy activity. Fresh footprints and equipment disturbance indicated that systematic patrols were attempting to locate the SEAL team's position through methodical terrain searching. The enemy had committed significant resources to finding and eliminating survivors from the failed reconnaissance mission. Sophia studied the search patterns while calculating routes that would avoid detection during her return journey with Glenn. The Taliban tactical approach showed professional competence that exceeded militia-level capabilities, suggesting that regular military units or foreign advisors were directing operations designed to prevent American rescue attempts. Her arrival at Neptune 7's position revealed the tactical situation had deteriorated significantly during her absence. Enemy forces had established observation posts on surrounding ridgelines, while conducting probe operations designed to identify defensive positions without triggering major engagement. The SEAL team was effectively surrounded, making future evacuation attempts increasingly dangerous. Walsh, enemy disposition has changed substantially since my departure. How has their tactical approach affected your defensive capabilities? Walsh's assessment reflected professional concern about their strategic situation. Carpenter, they're conducting systematic area denial operations. Each evacuation run you make increases the probability that they'll detect movement patterns and intercept future transport attempts. The tactical reality meant that her rescue mission was operating against time constraints that extended beyond medical requirements to include enemy adaptation to her presence. Each successful evacuation provided intelligence about her methods while reducing her tactical advantages for subsequent operations. Glenn's preparation for transport revealed complications that her medical assessment had anticipated but hoped to avoid. The vascular repair showed signs of stress that could result in renewed bleeding if movement became too aggressive. His pain levels had increased despite medication, suggesting that inflammation was affecting surgical sites in ways that could compromise the arterial reconstruction. Glenn, your vascular repair is holding, but it's fragile. I need you to remain completely still during transport while I handle all movement and navigation. Any muscle tension in your leg could disrupt the surgical site. Glenn's response reflected understanding combined with warrior determination. Carpenter, I'll be a sack of potatoes if that's what keeps this repair intact. Just get me somewhere that has real doctors and proper surgical facilities. The evacuation harness system required modification for Glenn's specific injuries, particularly the need to maintain leg immobilization while allowing torso flexibility for breathing and circulation. Sophia's engineering preparation had anticipated various casualty configurations, but practical implementation demanded improvisation that tested her equipment design under actual operational conditions. Loading Glenn into the transport system revealed the cumulative effects of physical exertion that were beginning to impact her performance. The first evacuation with Burke had depleted energy reserves while creating muscle fatigue that made the second casualty lift more difficult. Her preparation had emphasized endurance training, but theoretical conditioning differed from practical application under combat stress. Walsh, I'm beginning movement toward Rally Point Alpha with Glenn. Stone's improved condition means he can probably assist with his own evacuation when I return for the third run. Walsh's response carried tactical wisdom earned through years of special operations experience. Carpenter, pace yourself for sustainability rather than speed. This mission requires endurance more than rapid movement, and we need you functional for all evacuations. The advice reflected professional understanding of extended operations that tested individual capabilities beyond normal limits. Sophia's rescue mission was becoming a marathon rather than a sprint, demanding resource management that balanced immediate requirements against sustained performance over extended time periods. Movement with Glenn required different techniques than transport with Burke, primarily due to his consciousness and ability to provide limited assistance with balance and navigation. His awareness allowed coordination that unconscious transport couldn't provide, but also created psychological pressure as he monitored their tactical situation and recognized dangers that unconscious patients couldn't perceive. Carpenter, movement to our left approximately 200 meters. Glenn observed quietly. "Looks like individual personnel conducting reconnaissance rather than patrol formation." His tactical assessment proved accurate as Sophia identified a Taliban scout moving through terrain that would intersect their route if current movement patterns continued. The enemy soldiers showed professional fieldcraft that suggested special training rather than militia background, confirming that opposition forces included experienced military personnel. The evasion maneuver required route modification that added distance and complexity to terrain that was already challenging under optimal conditions. Glenn's leg injury made rapid movement impossible, while his consciousness created stress as he recognized their vulnerability during extended exposure to enemy observation. Guardian Angel, this is base actual. Shaw's transmission carried unusual urgency that suggested institutional complications were escalating beyond his ability to provide cover. Colonel Hunt has ordered immediate accounting of all personnel. You need to complete this mission within the next few hours or risk official intervention. The communication revealed that Sophia's unauthorized rescue was creating institutional pressure that could result in termination before completion. Military bureaucracy was beginning to assert control over operations that had succeeded by operating outside official channels. Her window for proving the necessity of unauthorized action was closing as rapidly as the medical window for casualty survival. Glenn absorbed the transmission implications while maintaining tactical awareness of their movement situation. "Carpenter, sounds like you're risking more than just your career with this rescue operation. Why are you doing this when you could stay safe and let official channels handle the situation?" The question struck at fundamental motivations that had driven months of unauthorized preparation and current risk acceptance that exceeded normal duty requirements. Sophia's response revealed principles that transcended institutional boundaries while acknowledging personal costs that her decision-making had accepted. "Glenn, I'm doing this because I have capabilities that you need, and official channels don't have resources that can reach you in time. Sometimes individual responsibility exceeds institutional authority when lives are at stake." The answer reflected moral clarity that combat situations could provide, moments when complex ethical calculations reduced to simple choices between action and inaction, between capability utilization and procedural compliance. Her rescue mission represented individual initiative confronting institutional limitation when survival depended on exceeding authorized boundaries. Rally Point Alpha appeared ahead through morning mist that was beginning to reveal terrain features that daylight would make visible to enemy observation. The tactical situation was evolving from night operations that provided concealment advantages to daylight conditions that would favor enemy forces with superior numbers and defensive positions. Burke's condition at the rally point showed stability that confirmed her surgical intervention had been successful, but also revealed the limitations of field treatment compared to hospital care. His vital signs remained within acceptable ranges, while his unconscious state prevented pain awareness that would accompany consciousness. The medical clock was still running despite her successful intervention. Base actual, this is Guardian Angel delivering second casualty to Rally Point Alpha. She reported while establishing Glenn in a secure position that would protect him during her final evacuation runs. 2 casualties secured, 3 remaining at original position. Enemy activity is increasing but manageable. Shaw's response carried personal concern that transcended professional communication protocols. Guardian Angel, you're pushing human endurance limits with this mission profile. Are you certain you can maintain performance levels for the remaining evacuations? The question addressed physical reality that Sophia was beginning to acknowledge despite her determination to complete the rescue mission. Her body was showing signs of accumulated stress while her tactical situation was becoming more complex with each successful evacuation. The final phases would test capabilities that preparation had developed but never fully validated under actual operational conditions. The return journey to Neptune 7's position for the third evacuation revealed how dramatically the tactical landscape had shifted during Sophia's previous transport operations. Taliban forces had abandoned their passive observation strategy in favor of active area sweeps designed to locate and eliminate the SEAL team before rescue operations could be completed. Fresh tracks and equipment disturbance indicated systematic grid searches that were methodically closing on Walsh's defensive position. Sophia's route modification required navigation through terrain that provided concealment while avoiding patrol patterns that enemy forces had established to interdict movement between the SEAL position and potential extraction routes. Her understanding of Taliban tactical doctrine, developed through months of unauthorized intelligence study, revealed that they were implementing encirclement procedures designed to prevent exactly the kind of individual rescue operation she was conducting. At 1,034 hours, she encountered the most dangerous obstacle yet encountered during her mission. A four-man Taliban patrol had established an observation post directly overlooking the approaches to Neptune 7's position, equipped with communications gear that would alert larger forces to any American rescue attempts. Their tactical placement made bypass attempts extremely risky, while direct confrontation would trigger engagement that would bring overwhelming enemy reinforcement. The solution required tactical innovation that combined stealth techniques with timing that exploited enemy procedural patterns. Sophia observed the patrol's rotation schedule and identified a brief window when their attention focused on communication procedures rather than area surveillance. The opportunity would last approximately 3 minutes, requiring movement that balanced speed against noise discipline. Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel approaching Neptune 7 for final evacuations. She transmitted through encrypted communications that Shaw monitored with increasing anxiety about institutional pressure. Enemy activity has increased significantly, but extraction remains feasible with careful timing. Shaw's response carried institutional warning that added bureaucratic urgency to tactical challenges. Guardian Angel Colonel Hunt has initiated formal inquiry into your absence. I've delayed official intervention as long as possible, but you need to complete this mission immediately or risk official termination. The communication revealed that her unauthorized rescue was creating command-level attention that could result in forced recall before mission completion. Military bureaucracy was asserting institutional control over operations that had succeeded by operating outside official boundaries, creating time pressure that exceeded even medical urgency for casualty survival. Her infiltration of the observation post required movement techniques that belonged more to special reconnaissance than medical evacuation procedures. Using natural terrain features and tactical patience that her unauthorized training had developed, she bypassed enemy positions during the narrow window when their surveillance attention was focused elsewhere. Walsh met her approach with professional relief combined with tactical concern about their deteriorating situation. Carpenter, enemy pressure has increased substantially during your absence. They're conducting coordinated sweeps that suggest they've identified our general location and are systematically eliminating potential hiding places. The assessment confirmed Sophia's observation that Taliban forces were implementing encirclement tactics designed to prevent rescue operations through overwhelming local superiority rather than direct assault. Their strategy showed tactical sophistication that exceeded standard militia capabilities while demonstrating resource commitment that suggested senior command priority for eliminating SEAL Team survivors. Stone's medical condition had improved enough to allow limited mobility assistance during evacuation, but his neurological symptoms required monitoring that field conditions made difficult. His consciousness remained clear while his physical capabilities showed signs of recovery that would allow cooperative movement rather than purely passive transport. Stone, your head injury symptoms have stabilized sufficiently for assisted evacuation. I need you to help with movement coordination, while I handle navigation and tactical security. Can you maintain balance and follow movement instructions during transport? Stone's response reflected medical understanding combined with operational determination. Carpenter, my cognitive function is clear enough for basic cooperation. I can assist with movement while you focus on getting us through enemy positions. The evacuation preparation for Stone required different approaches than the previous unconscious or semi-conscious casualties. His awareness allowed coordination that reduced transport complexity, while creating psychological pressure as he recognized tactical dangers that unconscious patients couldn't perceive. His medical training also made him aware of complications that civilian casualties might not understand. Boyd's shoulder injury had responded well to field treatment, allowing functional mobility that would enable him to assist with his own evacuation rather than requiring pure casualty transport. His condition represented the transition from medical emergency to tactical movement of walking wounded who could contribute to their own survival. Boyd, your shoulder injury limits lifting capability but doesn't prevent tactical movement. You'll be able to walk out under your own power while providing security assistance for the wounded personnel. Walsh's leg wound showed signs of inflammation that suggested infection was beginning, despite field sanitation procedures. His condition remained functional for tactical movement while requiring medical attention that only hospital facilities could provide. His leadership capabilities remained intact despite obvious pain that medication could only partially address. Walsh, your wound is showing early infection signs that will require antibiotic therapy beyond field capabilities. You can maintain tactical leadership during evacuation, but need definitive medical care within the next 12 hours. The consolidated evacuation plan required tactical coordination that exceeded normal medic responsibilities while demanding physical endurance that would challenge special operations personnel. Moving 3 ambulatory patients through hostile territory while maintaining medical monitoring and tactical security would test every aspect of Sophia's preparation. Gentlemen, our evacuation route will avoid known enemy positions while moving toward Rally Point Alpha, where Burke and Glenn are secured. Movement will be deliberate rather than rapid, emphasizing stealth over speed to avoid detection that would trigger engagement we can't win. The initial movement phase revealed how cumulative fatigue was affecting Sophia's performance, despite her comprehensive physical preparation. Hours of technical movement while carrying casualties had depleted energy reserves while creating muscle fatigue that made precise navigation more difficult. Her endurance training was being tested beyond simulated conditions. Stone's assistance with movement coordination provided capabilities that previous evacuations had lacked, allowing tactical flexibility that single-person transport couldn't achieve. His medical knowledge also enabled him to monitor his own condition while assisting with evaluation of other casualties' needs during movement. At 1,147 hours, the consolidated group encountered enemy forces that had detected their movement, despite careful concealment procedures. A Taliban patrol appeared on their movement route with tactical spacing that suggested they were actively hunting for SEAL Team survivors rather than conducting routine area surveillance. Contact left approximately 100 meters, Walsh whispered while maintaining tactical discipline despite his injuries. 4 personnel with communications equipment. They're moving directly toward our position. The tactical situation demanded immediate response that balanced concealment against preparation for engagement that could become unavoidable. Sophia's medical responsibilities conflicted with combat requirements as she calculated whether to prioritize casualty protection or tactical response to enemy contact. Boyd's functional mobility allowed him to provide security assistance despite his shoulder injury, positioning himself to cover approaches while Stone managed his own tactical movement. Walsh maintained command authority despite his medical condition, coordinating defensive preparations that their training had made instinctive. Carpenter, take Stone and continue movement toward Rally Point Alpha. Walsh directed with tactical authority that transcended rank considerations. Boyd and I will provide delaying action if contact becomes unavoidable. Sophia's response reflected medical priorities that challenged tactical doctrine about acceptable losses and mission priorities. Walsh, I'm not leaving wounded personnel to fight delaying actions while I escape with other casualties. We move together or we fight together. The declaration violated standard military procedures about medical personnel avoiding combat engagement, but represented moral commitment that exceeded institutional regulations. Her medical expertise made her valuable for casualty treatment, while her tactical training prepared her for combat support that traditional medic roles didn't include. The evasion maneuver that followed tested every aspect of tactical movement training that Sophia had pursued through unauthorized channels. Moving 4 personnel with varying degrees of injury through terrain that provided concealment while avoiding enemy detection required coordination that exceeded standard infantry procedures. Stone's medical knowledge proved invaluable for managing movement that balanced tactical requirements against medical limitations. His understanding of injury effects allowed him to anticipate problems while maintaining movement capabilities that kept the group functional under stress conditions. Rally Point Alpha appeared through terrain features that provided concealment from enemy observation while revealing the magnitude of the evacuation challenge that remained. Burke and Glenn's conditions had remained stable during her absence, but both required continued medical monitoring while the group planned movement toward forward operating base Sentinel. Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel at Rally Point Alpha with all 5 casualties consolidated. She transmitted through communications equipment that Shaw monitored with relief mixed with institutional anxiety. Beginning final movement phase toward base. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Shaw's response carried personal concern that transcended professional communication protocols. Guardian Angel, Colonel Hunt has authorized search operations for your location. Official rescue elements are being deployed to locate you. Your window for unauthorized operation is closing rapidly. The information revealed that institutional intervention was transitioning from bureaucratic inquiry to operational deployment designed to terminate her unauthorized rescue through direct command authority. Official search operations would complicate her mission while potentially endangering the casualties she had successfully evacuated. The final movement phase toward forward operating base Sentinel would test Sophia's endurance beyond anything her preparation had simulated. Moving 5 casualties across approximately 12 kilometers of hostile territory, while avoiding both enemy forces and official rescue operations that could result in mission termination before completion. Burke required continued passive transport, while Glenn's vascular repair demanded careful handling that prevented stress on surgical sites. Stone could provide limited assistance, while Boyd and Walsh maintained tactical security despite their injuries. The group represented a medical and tactical challenge that exceeded standard evacuation procedures. Gentlemen, this final movement will be the most dangerous phase of our evacuation. Enemy forces are conducting active searches while our own command is deploying assets to locate us. We need to reach base before either situation compromises our mission's success. Walsh's tactical assessment reflected professional understanding of their strategic situation. Carpenter, you've accomplished something that official resources couldn't achieve. Whatever happens during this final phase, you've already succeeded beyond anything we had reason to expect. The acknowledgement carried weight from someone whose special operations experience provided context for evaluating individual performance under impossible conditions. Sophia's unauthorized rescue had demonstrated capabilities that institutional assumptions had prevented from being recognized and utilized. The movement toward forward operating base Sentinel began at 1,223 hours, with tactical formation that balanced casualty protection against security requirements. Sophia maintained medical monitoring while providing tactical leadership that her comprehensive preparation had developed specifically for situations where multiple competencies were required simultaneously. Behind them, the Hindu Kush Mountains concealed evidence of an operation that had challenged fundamental assumptions about individual capability and institutional limitation. Ahead, forward operating base Sentinel waited with procedures and protocols that hadn't anticipated success achieved through channels that regulations prohibited. The stage was set for a confrontation between unauthorized achievement and institutional authority, between individual initiative and command structure, between results that exceeded expectations and methods that violated approved procedures. Sophia's rescue mission was approaching completion, but completion would trigger institutional responses that could define whether exceptional performance justified exceptional methods. The movement formation that departed Rally Point Alpha at 1,223 hours represented the culmination of everything Sophia had prepared for during months of unauthorized training that others had dismissed as excessive for someone of her assigned duties. Leading 5 wounded SEALs through hostile territory while avoiding both enemy forces and official search operations tested capabilities that exceeded standard medical personnel requirements by orders of magnitude. Burke's unconscious weight in the transport harness created constant physical stress that accumulated with each step across terrain that demanded precise balance and navigation. His surgical sites required monitoring that prevented her from focusing entirely on tactical movement, while his passive burden made evasive maneuvers more complex than previous evacuations had required. Glenn's vascular repair showed signs of stress that concerned Sophia despite her successful field surgery. The arterial reconstruction remained intact but demonstrated inflammation that suggested his condition could deteriorate if transport became too aggressive. His consciousness allowed cooperation that unconscious transport couldn't provide, while creating psychological pressure as he monitored their tactical situation. "Carpenter, how much farther to base?" Glenn asked during a brief rest stop where she checked his circulation and pulse strength. "My leg is starting to feel numb, which probably isn't a good sign for your vascular repair work." Her medical assessment confirmed concerns that field surgery had limitations regardless of technical competence. "Glenn, the numbness indicates swelling that's putting pressure on the repair site. I can manage it with positioning and medication, but you need proper surgical facilities within the next few hours." Stone's head injury symptoms had stabilized enough to allow him to assist with tactical observation while maintaining his own movement coordination. His medical knowledge proved invaluable for monitoring other casualties while recognizing signs of complications that required immediate attention. His functional recovery represented the difference between pure casualty transport and evacuation with medical support capabilities. Movement left, approximately 300 meters. Stone observed quietly while scanning approaches through binoculars that had survived the original ambush. Looks like organized patrol rather than random search activity. Boyd maintained tactical security despite his shoulder injury, his functional arm allowing him to carry weapons and provide defensive coverage, while his medical limitations prevented full combat effectiveness. His condition represented the walking wounded who could contribute to group survival while requiring continued medical monitoring. Walsh's leadership authority remained intact despite obvious pain from his infected leg wound. His tactical experience provided coordination that kept the group functioning as a unit rather than a collection of individual casualties requiring independent medical attention. His command presence was essential for maintaining discipline under stress conditions that tested everyone's limits. Carpenter, enemy patrol patterns suggest they're attempting to channel our movement toward predetermined intercept positions, Walsh observed while studying terrain features that offered concealment options. We need to modify our route to avoid tactical traps they're establishing. The route modification required navigation skills that Sophia had developed through topographical study that others had considered academic rather than operational. Her understanding of local terrain features allowed identification of approaches that wouldn't appear on standard military maps, while providing concealment from enemy observation and official search operations. At 1,347 hours, the dual threat materialized simultaneously as Taliban forces and American search elements converged on approaches to their position. Enemy patrols were conducting systematic sweeps, while helicopter assets deployed by Colonel Hunt were establishing observation patterns designed to locate unauthorized personnel movements. Aircraft approaching from the southeast, Boyd reported while maintaining security watch despite his injured shoulder. American helicopters conducting search patterns that will intersect our position within 10 minutes. The tactical dilemma forced Sophia to choose between concealment from enemy forces and concealment from official rescue operations that could terminate her mission before completion. Both threats represented different forms of failure, but official intervention would prevent her from demonstrating that unauthorized methods could succeed where official resources had failed. We're moving into that ravine system to avoid helicopter observation, she decided while adjusting Burke's position in the transport harness. Official search operations can't see us if we're not visible from aircraft, and the terrain will also provide concealment from enemy ground forces. The descent into the ravine system required technical movement skills that challenged every member of the group according to their individual capabilities. Burke's unconscious weight made Sophia's movement more difficult, while Glenn's vascular repair demanded careful handling that prevented stress on surgical sites. Stone's recovery allowed him to assist with Burke's transport during technical sections where additional stability was required. His medical knowledge enabled him to monitor transport procedures while ensuring that movement didn't compromise surgical repairs that field conditions had made fragile. Stone, help me stabilize Burke during this descent. The angle is steep enough that his weight could shift and destabilize both of us if we're not careful about movement coordination. The ravine provided concealment from aerial observation while creating new tactical challenges as Taliban forces adjusted their search patterns to account for terrain features that offered hiding places. Enemy tactical doctrine included procedures for clearing confined spaces that American forces might use for concealment during escape and evasion operations. Glenn's condition deteriorated during the technical movement as inflammation affected circulation in ways that field treatment couldn't address effectively. His vascular repair remained intact but showed signs of complications that required hospital intervention beyond anything Sophia could provide in field conditions. Carpenter, I'm losing sensation below the repair site, Glenn reported with medical understanding of his condition's implications. Your surgery is holding, but swelling is compromising circulation despite your field treatment. Her medical assessment confirmed that field surgery had limitations that time and proper facilities could address, but immediate field conditions couldn't resolve. Glenn needed definitive medical care that only forward operating base Sentinel could provide, making mission completion essential for his survival. At 1,456 hours, the sound of automatic weapons fire echoed across the ravine system as Taliban forces engaged what appeared to be American search elements. The engagement confirmed that multiple operations were converging on their general area, while creating tactical complications that could affect their movement towards safety. "That's our search element making contact with enemy forces," Walsh observed while monitoring radio frequencies for tactical updates. "Official rescue operations are now engaged in combat that could bring additional enemy attention to our sector." The engagement created opportunities and dangers in equal measure. Enemy attention focused on active combat rather than continued searching, while American forces were now committed to tactical situations that might prevent them from detecting unauthorized personnel movement. The window for reaching forward operating base Sentinel without detection was opening, while becoming more dangerous. Sophia's physical condition was approaching limits that months of endurance training had prepared her to recognize and manage. Cumulative fatigue from carrying Burke across hostile terrain was affecting her balance and decision-making, while medical responsibilities demanded continued competence despite exhaustion. "Base Actual, this is Guardian Angel approaching final approach to base perimeter," she transmitted through communications equipment that Shaw monitored with institutional anxiety about official intervention. 5 casualties stable and mobile, estimated arrival time 30 minutes. Shaw's response carried urgency that reflected escalating institutional pressure. "Guardian Angel, Colonel Hunt has deployed multiple assets to locate you. Official search operations are actively looking for your signature. You need to reach base immediately, or risk intervention that could compromise your mission completion." The final approach to forward operating base Sentinel required movement across open ground that would expose them to observation from both enemy forces and official search elements. The tactical situation demanded timing that balanced concealment against speed while maintaining medical care for casualties whose conditions required continued monitoring. Burke's vital signs remained stable but critical, requiring hospital facilities that only base medical could provide. His unconscious condition had simplified transport while creating medical uncertainty about complications that field monitoring couldn't detect. Time was running out for surgical intervention that could address damage beyond her field capabilities. Glenn's circulation problems were worsening despite her attempts to manage swelling through positioning and medication. His vascular repair showed signs of compromise that suggested her field surgery was approaching its limits without proper surgical support. Medical priorities demanded immediate evacuation to facilities that could provide definitive care. The perimeter of forward operating base Sentinel appeared through terrain features that had once seemed impossibly distant when she began her unauthorized rescue mission. Guard towers that had been theoretical destinations during her planning were now visible landmarks that represented safety for casualties who had been written off as lost. "Gentlemen, we're approaching home," she announced while making final adjustments to equipment that had sustained them through impossible conditions. Forward operating base Sentinel is approximately 1 kilometer ahead through terrain that provides concealment until we reach the perimeter. Walsh's response reflected professional amazement at mission completion that had exceeded every reasonable expectation. "Carpenter, what you've accomplished violates everything I thought I knew about individual capabilities and institutional limitations. This mission should have been impossible for one person to complete." Stone's medical perspective provided context that highlighted the comprehensive nature of her achievement. Carpenter's surgical work saved Burke's life, while her tactical movement got all of us through hostile territory that official resources couldn't reach. This represents capability integration that exceeds normal specialty boundaries. Boyd's tactical assessment confirmed the military significance of her unauthorized operation. What she accomplished represents special operations capability in someone whose official duties never included combat missions. This changes everything about how individual potentials should be evaluated and utilized. The final movement toward base perimeter began at 1,534 hours, with tactical formation that emphasized speed over concealment as proximity to safety reduced the benefits of careful movement compared to rapid completion. Sophia's endurance was approaching complete exhaustion, while medical responsibilities demanded continued competence until casualties reached proper medical facilities. At 1,547 hours, the guard towers of forward operating base Sentinel became clearly visible through morning light that revealed the full scope of her achievement. 5 wounded SEALs who had been written off as casualties were approaching safety because someone had refused to accept institutional limitations on individual capability. Base perimeter, this is Guardian Angel requesting immediate medical evacuation for 5 SEAL casualties. She transmitted through official channels that would announce her unauthorized mission to command authority that had been searching for her location, approaching main gate with critical patients requiring hospital intervention. The transmission would trigger institutional responses that could range from recognition to court-martial proceedings, but mission completion took precedence over personal consequences. Her rescue operation had succeeded beyond every reasonable expectation, while proving that sometimes the most important military action was refusing to accept that some missions were impossible. Forward Operating Base Sentinel waited ahead with procedures and protocols that hadn't anticipated success, achieved through methods that regulations prohibited. Behind them, the Hindu Kush Mountains concealed evidence of an operation that had challenged fundamental assumptions about what individual soldiers could accomplish when institutional resources proved insufficient. The stage was set for a confrontation between unauthorized achievement and military authority, between results that exceeded expectations and methods that violated approved procedures. Sophia's rescue mission was approaching completion, but completion would force an entire command structure to confront everything they thought they knew about individual capability and institutional limitation. The first guard at Forward Operating Base Sentinel to spot the approaching figures rubbed his eyes twice before reaching for his radio with hands that trembled from disbelief rather than fear. Through the morning haze that rose from the desert floor, he observed what appeared to be a single soldier pulling improvised stretchers, carrying multiple casualties, while 3 wounded personnel moved under their own power in tactical formation. Sergeant Brooke Mason had been monitoring the eastern approach for 6 hours without observing anything more significant than routine wildlife movement across terrain that intelligence assessments had classified as too hostile for individual personnel to traverse. The figures approaching her checkpoint violated every assumption about what was possible in their operational environment. Base Command, this is Checkpoint Echo. Mason transmitted with professional uncertainty about what she was observing. I have visual contact with personnel approaching from Grid Square 7 Alpha. Single operator transporting multiple casualties through terrain that's been classified as impassable for rescue operations. The response from Base Command carried skepticism mixed with urgent curiosity about reports that contradicted tactical assumptions. Checkpoint Echo, confirm your assessment. Are you observing American personnel in hostile territory without authorized transportation assets? Mason adjusted her binoculars while studying the approaching group with growing amazement at what appeared to be an impossible tactical situation. Base Command, confirmed American personnel. Single female operator transporting what appears to be 5 casualties using improvised evacuation equipment. Personnel are moving in tactical formation despite obvious injuries. Through her observation equipment, Mason could identify Sophia's distinctive physical characteristics despite the combat equipment and obvious exhaustion that marked extended operations under extreme conditions. The recognition created cognitive dissonance that forced her to reconcile official reports about presumed casualties with direct observation of living personnel. Base Command, the primary operator appears to be Sergeant First Class Carpenter, who was declared killed in action 72 hours ago. Repeat, personnel presumed KIA are approaching checkpoint with multiple casualties requiring medical evacuation. The silence that followed Mason's transmission reflected institutional processing of information that challenged fundamental assumptions about individual capabilities and operational possibilities. Base Command was confronting evidence that official assessments had been wrong about both personnel survival and rescue feasibility. Captain Gregory Lawson arrived at the main gate within minutes of receiving reports that violated everything he thought he understood about their tactical situation. His expression combined professional amazement with institutional concern about operations that had apparently succeeded outside authorized channels while producing results that official resources hadn't achieved. Mason, explain exactly what you're observing, Lawson directed while studying the approaching group through his own binoculars. These personnel were declared casualties based on reliable intelligence about their tactical situation. Mason's response reflected the difficulty of reconciling direct observation with official documentation. Sir, Sergeant Carpenter is approaching our perimeter with 5 wounded personnel who appear to be SEAL Team 7, which was listed as missing presumed dead after their reconnaissance mission failed. Lawson absorbed the information while calculating institutional implications of unauthorized operations that had succeeded where official resources had failed. His command responsibility included accounting for personnel whose presumed deaths had triggered condolence procedures while they were apparently conducting successful rescue operations. Medical personnel responded to emergency alerts with efficiency that reflected months of trauma training under combat conditions. Major Lindsay Crawford arrived with complete trauma teams while trying to understand how casualties who couldn't be reached by conventional evacuation were arriving at their facility through unauthorized means. Lawson, explain how we're receiving casualties from operations that were classified as failed with total personnel loss. Crawford demanded while preparing medical equipment for trauma cases that official reports had indicated were beyond rescue. Lawson's response reflected institutional uncertainty about events that exceeded authorized operational parameters. Crawford, I'm receiving real-time reports that challenge everything we thought we knew about individual capabilities and mission feasibility under extreme conditions. At 1,603 hours, Sophia reached the main gate with Burke secured and transport equipment that had sustained them through hostile territory while maintaining medical stability that field surgery had achieved under impossible conditions. Her physical condition reflected cumulative exhaustion that months of endurance training had prepared her to manage while maintaining functional competence. Gate security, this is Sergeant First Class Carpenter requesting immediate medical evacuation for 5 SEAL casualties. She announced through official channels that would document her unauthorized mission while triggering institutional responses ranging from recognition to disciplinary action. The guard corporal who responded to her identification request stared at documentation that confirmed the identity of someone who had been officially declared dead while standing before him with evidence of successful operations that exceeded every reasonable expectation. Sergeant Carpenter, your status is listed as killed in action with memorial services scheduled for next week. How are you requesting medical evacuation for personnel who are officially listed as casualties? Sophia's response reflected exhaustion combined with determination to complete medical responsibilities that transcended bureaucratic complications. Corporal, these men need immediate surgical intervention. Questions about authorization can be addressed after they receive hospital care that their conditions require. Major Crawford's medical assessment of the casualties revealed surgical competence that exceeded anything she had expected from field treatment under combat conditions. Burke's abdominal repairs showed technical proficiency that challenged assumptions about what was possible without proper facilities, while demonstrating medical knowledge that exceeded standard combat medic training. Carpenter, explain the surgical procedures you performed on these casualties, Crawford demanded while examining suture work that showed advanced trauma training. This level of surgical intervention exceeds your documented medical qualifications. Sophia's explanation revealed the comprehensive nature of her unauthorized preparation while acknowledging personal development that had exceeded institutional requirements. Ma'am, I pursued additional medical training because I recognize that combat situations might require capabilities beyond standard protocols. Glenn's vascular repair drew particular attention from medical personnel who recognized surgical techniques that belonged in operating rooms rather than battlefield conditions. His circulation had been restored through procedures that required precision and knowledge that traditional combat medic training didn't provide. This arterial reconstruction represents surgical competence that exceeds resident-level capabilities, Crawford observed while examining the repair site. Where did you acquire vascular surgery skills that your personnel file doesn't document? Stone's neurological recovery confirmed that Sophia's assessment and treatment of head trauma had been accurate, despite field conditions that made proper evaluation extremely difficult. His cognitive function showed improvement that suggested her medical intervention had prevented complications that could have resulted in permanent damage. Colonel Philip Hunt arrived at the medical facility as trauma teams stabilized casualties whose survival violated every assumption about rescue feasibility in their operational environment. His expression reflected institutional amazement combined with command responsibility for operations that had apparently succeeded outside authorized channels. Carpenter, explain exactly how you conducted rescue operations in terrain that our assessment deemed inaccessible to American personnel. Hunt demanded while studying after-action reports that would have to account for success achieved through unauthorized methods. Sophia's response revealed tactical and medical capabilities that exceeded official recognition while acknowledging violations of institutional protocols that her moral judgment had overridden. Sir, I used capabilities that I developed independently to reach personnel who couldn't be evacuated through conventional resources. Hunt studied her equipment and documentation while calculating institutional implications of individual performance that challenged fundamental assumptions about specialty boundaries and operational limitations. Her success represented both vindication of unauthorized preparation and indictment of institutional failure to utilize available capabilities. Carpenter, your unauthorized operation succeeded where official resources failed while violating every protocol designed to prevent individual personnel from exceeding assigned roles. This creates complications that extend beyond simple recognition of exceptional performance. The medical facility became the focal point for institutional processing of events that challenged established procedures while producing results that exceeded every reasonable expectation. Personnel who had been declared dead were receiving hospital treatment, while someone whose capabilities had been consistently underestimated was demonstrating competence that exceeded official assumptions. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed arrived with SEAL operational personnel who had been preparing memorial services for teammates they had believed were killed in action. His expression reflected professional amazement at reunion with personnel whose deaths had been accepted as inevitable given their tactical situation. Walsh, explain how you survived in hostile territory for 72 hours while maintaining unit integrity. Reed demanded while trying to understand tactical success that exceeded special operations planning assumptions. Walsh's response highlighted Sophia's comprehensive contribution to their survival, while acknowledging capabilities that had exceeded every expectation about individual potential under extreme conditions. Sir, Sergeant Carpenter conducted surgical procedures, tactical movement, and medical evacuation that saved all our lives through methods that official resources couldn't provide. Staff Sergeant Curtis Shaw approached Sophia with professional relief mixed with institutional concern about the unauthorized communication support he had provided during her rescue mission. His expression reflected personal satisfaction with mission success combined with anxiety about potential disciplinary consequences. Carpenter, your mission succeeded beyond anything we thought possible, but it's created institutional complications that could affect both our careers. Shaw observed while acknowledging his role in supporting operations that had violated established protocols. Sophia's response reflected exhaustion, combined with satisfaction that moral responsibility had been fulfilled despite institutional obstacles that had prevented official action. Shaw, we saved 5 lives that would have been lost if we had followed procedures that prevented effective action when it was needed most. The debriefing room was prepared for sessions that would have to account for unauthorized operations that had succeeded, where official resources had failed, while challenging fundamental assumptions about individual capabilities and institutional limitations. Personnel who had been presumed dead would provide testimony about survival, achieved through methods that regulations prohibited. Master Chief Petty Officer Kenneth Ward observed the medical treatment with professional interest in capabilities that exceeded standard combat medic training, while recognizing tactical competence that challenged assumptions about specialty role boundaries. Carpenter's performance represents capability integration that exceeds normal military categorization, Ward commented while studying after-action evidence. This changes everything about how individual potential should be evaluated and utilized within institutional frameworks. Corporal Meredith Fox documented equipment and procedures that had enabled success under conditions that standard planning had deemed impossible, while trying to understand how unauthorized preparation had produced capabilities that official training hadn't developed. The improvised evacuation systems and surgical equipment represent innovation that exceeded standard issue capabilities, Fox observed while cataloging evidence of preparation that had anticipated situations beyond normal operational parameters. Colonel Hunt convened emergency sessions to address institutional implications of unauthorized success while trying to balance recognition of exceptional performance against maintenance of command authority and procedural compliance. The situation represented unprecedented challenges to established military culture. This operation has demonstrated individual capabilities that exceed institutional assumptions while challenging fundamental principles about authorization and command structure. Hunt announced while preparing for decisions that would define how the military responded to success achieved through unauthorized methods. The medical teams completed initial treatment of casualties, whose survival had been achieved through individual initiative when institutional resources had proved insufficient. Their conditions were stable while requiring continued hospital care that only proper facilities could provide. Burke's surgical sites showed signs of healing that confirmed Sophia's field procedures had been medically sound despite conditions that challenged hospital capabilities. His survival represented validation of unauthorized medical intervention under impossible circumstances. Glenn's vascular repair functioned normally while requiring monitoring that would determine whether field surgery had achieved permanent restoration or temporary stabilization. His circulation demonstrated that individual competence could succeed where institutional resources couldn't reach. Forward Operating Base Sentinel processed the implications of events that had challenged every assumption about what was possible when individual capability exceeded institutional limitation. The rescue mission was complete, but its consequences were just beginning to reshape how the military understood individual potential and organizational effectiveness. The formal investigation convened 48 hours after Sophia's unauthorized return began, with institutional procedures designed to address violations that had never been complicated by such unambiguous success. Colonel Hunt presided over proceedings that would determine whether exceptional results justified exceptional methods, or whether military discipline required punishment regardless of operational outcomes. The conference room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel had hosted countless briefings about failed operations and institutional limitations, but never a session examining unauthorized success that challenged fundamental assumptions about individual capability and command authority. Maps displaying Sophia's route-covered walls that had previously shown only enemy positions and failed rescue attempts. Sergeant First Class Carpenter, Hunt began with formal precision that masked personal amazement at her achievement. This investigation will examine your decision to conduct unauthorized rescue operations, your methods for achieving results that official resources couldn't accomplish, and the institutional implications of individual initiative that exceeded command approval. Sophia sat facing a panel that included Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hayes from Regional Command, Major Thomas Bradley from Military Police, and Captain Susan Morrison from Personnel Review. Their expressions reflected institutional uncertainty about how to process success, achieved through methods that violated established protocols while producing results that exceeded every reasonable expectation. Sir, I conducted unauthorized medical intervention because official evacuation assets weren't available within the survival timeline of SEAL Team 7 casualties. Sophia responded with exhausted professionalism that reflected moral certainty despite potential career consequences. My assessment indicated that following proper channels would result in preventable deaths. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes consulted documentation that revealed the comprehensive nature of Sophia's unauthorized preparation, while trying to understand how individual initiative had produced capabilities that institutional training hadn't developed. Sergeant Carpenter, explain how you acquired surgical competence, tactical movement skills, and logistical capabilities that exceed your documented qualifications. The question struck at the heart of institutional assumptions about role boundaries and individual development. Sophia's response revealed months of preparation that others had dismissed, while acknowledging personal initiative that had transcended assigned limitations through comprehensive self-improvement. Ma'am, I recognize that Forward Operating Base medical support might encounter situations requiring capabilities beyond standard protocols. I pursued additional training in trauma surgery, mountain rescue techniques, and tactical movement because I understood that combat conditions might demand integrated competencies rather than narrow specialization. Major Bradley leaned forward with legal concerns about unauthorized operations that had succeeded while violating multiple regulations designed to maintain command authority and procedural compliance. Sergeant Carpenter, military effectiveness depends on personnel following orders and staying within assigned roles. If everyone decided independently when to exceed their authority, we'd have chaos rather than disciplined military operations. Sophia's response addressed institutional concerns while asserting moral principles that transcended bureaucratic procedures. Sir, I understand the importance of military discipline, but I also believe that exceptional circumstances require exceptional responses when lives are at stake and official resources prove insufficient. Captain Morrison reviewed personnel files that documented Sophia's consistent competence within assigned duties, while revealing no previous indication of the comprehensive capabilities her rescue mission had demonstrated. Sergeant Carpenter, your performance evaluations indicate exceptional technical competence but no suggestion that you possessed tactical and medical capabilities exceeding your assigned specialty. The observation highlighted institutional failure to recognize individual potential that exceeded traditional role categories while demonstrating evaluation procedures that measured compliance rather than comprehensive capability. Sophia's preparation had developed outside official channels because official channels hadn't provided opportunities for the kind of integrated training her mission had required. Walsh entered the conference room with medical clearance that allowed him to provide testimony about tactical and medical events that had saved his team's lives through individual competence that official resources couldn't match. His presence represented transition from casualty requiring rescue to witness, providing evidence about capabilities that institutional assumptions had failed to recognize. Colonel Hunt, Sergeant Carpenter conducted surgical procedures under combat conditions that exceeded anything our medical training had prepared us to expect from field treatment. Walsh testified with professional authority that special operations experience provided. Her tactical movement through hostile territory demonstrated individual capabilities that challenged our assumptions about what was possible under extreme conditions. Stone provided medical perspective that confirmed the technical competence of surgical procedures that had been performed without proper facilities, while maintaining standards that hospital environments would find acceptable. His testimony validated capabilities that exceeded documented training, while demonstrating innovation under impossible constraints. Sergeant Carpenter's abdominal surgery on Burke saved his life through techniques that required advanced trauma training, while her vascular repair on Glenn restored circulation using procedures that belong in operating rooms rather than battlefield conditions. Stone reported with medical authority that confirmed her competence. Without her intervention, 3 of us would have died waiting for evacuation that official resources couldn't provide. Glenn's testimony addressed the tactical aspects of evacuation that had required mountaineering skills, strategic thinking, and physical endurance that exceeded standard expectations for medical personnel while demonstrating comprehensive preparation that others had dismissed as inappropriate for someone of her assigned duties. Sergeant Carpenter transported 5 casualties across approximately 15 kilometers of hostile territory, using improvised equipment and tactical movement that avoided enemy detection while maintaining medical stability for critical patients. Glenn reported while acknowledging capabilities that his SEAL training allowed him to evaluate professionally. Her performance integrated multiple specialties that official training doesn't combine. Boyd and the other rescued SEALs provided additional testimony that confirmed the comprehensive nature of Sophia's achievement while highlighting institutional failure to recognize and utilize capabilities that existed outside traditional role boundaries. Their survival represented validation of individual initiative when institutional resources proved inadequate. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes studied after-action reports that documented tactical and medical success achieved through unauthorized methods, while trying to balance recognition of exceptional performance against maintenance of command authority and procedural compliance. Sergeant Carpenter, your results are undeniably positive, but your methods violated fundamental principles about authorization and chain of command. The institutional dilemma reflected broader questions about how military organizations should respond to individual excellence that exceeded official expectations while challenging established procedures designed to maintain discipline and effectiveness. Sophia's success created precedents that could either encourage innovation or undermine authority structures. Colonel Hunt consulted legal opinions and command guidance while calculating institutional implications of decisions that would define how the military responded to unauthorized success. His determination would establish precedents affecting every soldier whose capabilities exceeded official recognition while maintaining organizational integrity. This investigation reveals individual performance that exceeded institutional assumptions while achieving results that official resources couldn't accomplish. Hunt announced while preparing conclusions that would address competing military values of innovation and discipline. However, success doesn't automatically justify violations of established procedures designed to maintain military effectiveness. Major Crawford provided medical testimony that confirmed the technical competence of surgical procedures while acknowledging training gaps that had prevented institutional recognition of capabilities that individual initiative had developed. Her assessment revealed both validation of Sophia's preparation and indictment of evaluation procedures that failed to identify comprehensive competence. Sergeant Carpenter's medical interventions saved lives through surgical competence that exceeded standard combat medic training while demonstrating innovation that field conditions demanded. Crawford testified with professional authority that medical experience provided. Her preparation anticipated scenarios that official training hadn't addressed. Staff Sergeant Shaw faced questioning about his communication support for unauthorized operations, while defending decisions that had enabled successful rescue when official channels had failed to provide adequate resources. His testimony revealed institutional complications created by success achieved outside approved procedures. "I provided communication support because Sergeant Carpenter possessed capabilities that SEAL Team 7 needed and official evacuation assets couldn't provide," Shaw explained while acknowledging his role in supporting operations that violated regulations. "Sometimes supporting unauthorized excellence serves institutional objectives better than following procedures that prevent effective action." The investigation expanded to include broader questions about institutional capability assessment and individual development that transcended immediate concerns about disciplinary action. Sophia's success had revealed systematic problems with evaluation procedures that failed to recognize comprehensive competence while constraining individual potential within artificial boundaries. Lieutenant Commander Reed provided special operations perspective that placed Sophia's achievement in context of tactical standards that SEAL training had established while acknowledging individual performance that exceeded special operations expectations. Sergeant Carpenter's rescue mission demonstrated capability integration that our most advanced training programs don't achieve, while producing results under conditions that would challenge experienced special operations personnel. The institutional response began crystallizing around recognition that exceptional circumstances had produced exceptional performance while creating precedents that required careful consideration of individual initiative versus command authority. Sophia's success couldn't be dismissed while her methods couldn't be automatically endorsed without institutional consequences. Master Chief Ward addressed the panel with senior enlisted perspective that balanced recognition of individual excellence with understanding of organizational requirements that maintained military effectiveness through disciplined procedures and clear authority structures. Sergeant Carpenter's achievement represents individual excellence that exceeded institutional assumptions while challenging established procedures designed to maintain military discipline, Ward observed while acknowledging competing values that her success had highlighted. This situation requires responses that recognize exceptional performance while maintaining organizational integrity. Colonel Hunt received guidance from Regional Command that reflected institutional uncertainty about how to address unauthorized success while maintaining command authority and procedural compliance. The military was confronting unprecedented questions about individual capability and organizational limitation that Sophia's rescue mission had forced into the open. Higher Command has reviewed this situation and determined that exceptional circumstances require exceptional responses, Hunt announced while preparing decisions that would establish precedents for how the military addressed individual initiative that exceeded official expectations. Sergeant Carpenter's unauthorized operations succeeded where official resources failed while demonstrating capabilities that institutional assumptions had failed to recognize. The formal conclusion of investigation proceedings reflected institutional recognition that traditional approaches to individual assessment and capability utilization required modification to accommodate realities that Sophia's success had revealed. Her rescue mission had become a catalyst for broader organizational change. This investigation concludes that Sergeant Carpenter's unauthorized rescue operation, while violating established procedures, achieved results that official resources couldn't accomplish through individual capabilities that exceeded institutional recognition. Hunt announced while establishing precedents that would affect future policy development. Her actions will result in commendation rather than disciplinary action, with institutional changes designed to better recognize and utilize comprehensive individual capabilities. The decision represented institutional evolution prompted by individual achievement that had challenged fundamental assumptions about capability boundaries and role limitations. Sophia's moral courage had forced the military to confront organizational constraints that prevented effective utilization of available human resources. Sophia received notification that her unauthorized rescue mission would result in formal recognition rather than court-martial proceedings, while creating precedents that encouraged, rather than constrained individual development that exceeded traditional specialty boundaries. Her preparation and moral courage had transformed institutional understanding of individual potential. Sergeant Carpenter, your unauthorized operation demonstrated capabilities that institutional assumptions had failed to recognize while achieving results that official resources couldn't accomplish, Hunt concluded while establishing recognition that validated individual initiative when institutional resources proved inadequate. Your example will prompt systematic changes designed to better identify and utilize comprehensive individual capabilities throughout military operations. 6 weeks after her unauthorized rescue mission, Sophia stood before an assembly of personnel at Forward Operating Base Sentinel that represented the most significant recognition ceremony in the installation's operational history. The gathering included regional command officers, special operations leadership, and medical personnel, whose understanding of individual capability had been fundamentally transformed by witnessing results that exceeded every institutional assumption. The morning sun cast long shadows across the formation as Colonel Hunt prepared to address achievements that had challenged established military culture while demonstrating possibilities that traditional evaluation procedures had failed to recognize. The ceremony would establish precedents affecting how the entire organization identified and utilized comprehensive individual capabilities. Today we recognize extraordinary individual performance that succeeded where institutional resources failed while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded official assumptions about specialty role boundaries. Hunt announced while addressing personnel whose own potential might have been similarly constrained by artificial limitations. Sergeant First Class Sophia Carpenter's unauthorized rescue operations saved 5 lives through methods challenged fundamental assumptions about what individual soldiers can accomplish when institutional procedures prove inadequate. General Patricia Williams had traveled from regional headquarters specifically to participate in recognition that would establish policy precedents affecting capability assessment throughout military operations. Her presence indicated institutional acknowledgement that individual achievement had exposed systematic problems requiring comprehensive organizational response. Sergeant Carpenter's rescue mission represents more than exceptional individual performance. Williams observed while addressing broader implications of success achieved outside authorized channels. Her achievement demonstrates that institutional effectiveness requires better recognition and utilization of comprehensive individual capabilities that traditional evaluation procedures fail to identify. Burke approached the ceremony using a walking aid that medical recovery required while demonstrating survival that field surgery under impossible conditions had achieved. His presence provided living testimony to surgical competence that had exceeded documented training while validating preparation that others had dismissed as inappropriate for someone of Sophia's assigned duties. Sergeant Carpenter performed emergency surgery that saved my life using techniques that required advanced trauma training under conditions that would challenge hospital environments. Burke testified while acknowledging capabilities that his recovery had validated. Her medical intervention prevented complications that would have resulted in my death regardless of subsequent hospital treatment. Glenn's participation in the ceremony demonstrated circulation restored through vascular repair that had been accomplished without proper surgical facilities, while maintaining standards that definitive medical care had confirmed. His recovery represented validation of field surgery that had exceeded every reasonable expectation about what was possible under combat constraints. The arterial reconstruction that Sergeant Carpenter performed under battlefield conditions restored full circulation through surgical competence that exceeded resident-level capabilities. Glenn reported while acknowledging intervention that had saved his leg and possibly his life. Her preparation anticipated medical scenarios that official training hadn't addressed. Stone provided medical perspective that confirmed the comprehensive nature of surgical procedures while acknowledging tactical movement that had enabled evacuation when conventional resources couldn't reach their position. His testimony validated both medical and tactical competence that exceeded traditional specialty boundaries. Sergeant Carpenter's rescue operation integrated surgical competence, tactical movement, and logistical planning that exceeded anything our training had prepared us to expect from individual capability. Stone observed while recognizing achievement that challenged assumptions about what single soldiers could accomplish under extreme conditions. Major Crawford presented medical documentation that confirmed the technical accuracy of surgical procedures, while acknowledging institutional failure to recognize and develop capabilities that individual initiative had created through comprehensive preparation that exceeded assigned requirements. Post-operative evaluation confirms that Sergeant Carpenter's field surgery met hospital standards despite being performed without proper facilities, equipment, or environmental controls. Crawford reported while validating competence that her own assumptions had failed to anticipate. Her preparation demonstrates individual development that exceeded institutional recognition. Lieutenant Commander Reed addressed the assembly with special operations perspective that placed Sophia's achievement in context of tactical standards, while acknowledging individual performance that had exceeded professional military expectations under conditions that challenged experienced operators. Sergeant Carpenter's tactical movement through hostile territory while transporting 5 casualties demonstrated individual capabilities that our most advanced training programs don't develop. Reed testified while recognizing achievement that transcended traditional role limitations. Her success required integration of multiple specialties that official training doesn't combine. The citation for the Silver Star that General Williams prepared to present reflected official recognition of heroism that had exceeded duty requirements while challenging institutional assumptions about individual potential and organizational effectiveness. The award represented acknowledgement that exceptional circumstances had required exceptional individual response. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against hostile forces while serving as combat medic with Forward Operating Base Sentinel, Williams read while presenting recognition that validated moral courage in exceeding institutional limitations. Sergeant First Class Carpenter voluntarily conducted unauthorized rescue operations that saved 5 lives through individual capabilities that exceeded official assumptions about medical personnel qualifications and tactical limitations. Walsh accepted invitation to provide final testimony about rescue operations that had challenged his own assumptions about individual capability, while demonstrating comprehensive competence that traditional evaluation procedures had failed to recognize or develop through institutional channels. Sergeant Carpenter's rescue mission accomplished what SEAL Team 7 couldn't accomplish for ourselves, through individual preparation that exceeded anything our special operations training had anticipated. Walsh testified while acknowledging achievement that had redefined his understanding of individual potential. Her success demonstrates that comprehensive capability can exist in unexpected forms when institutional assumptions fail to recognize individual preparation and moral determination. The institutional changes that Sophia's rescue mission had prompted extended far beyond individual recognition to systematic modification of capability assessment and development procedures designed to identify and utilize comprehensive competence that traditional evaluation had constrained within artificial specialty boundaries. Colonel Hunt announced policy modifications that would affect personnel evaluation throughout the command structure while creating opportunities for individual development that exceeded traditional role limitations. Effective immediately, this command will implement comprehensive capability assessment designed to identify individual competencies that exceed traditional specialty boundaries while creating development opportunities that encourage rather than constrain individual preparation for scenarios that standard training doesn't address. Captain Morrison outlined new evaluation procedures that would assess tactical thinking, medical competence, and leadership potential regardless of assigned specialties while creating advancement opportunities based on demonstrated capability rather than traditional career progression through narrow specialty focus. Personnel evaluation will now include assessment of comprehensive capabilities that may exceed assigned duties while creating development paths that recognize individual preparation for scenarios beyond standard operational parameters. Morrison announced while establishing procedures that Sophia's success had made necessary. Major Bradley presented legal framework modifications that would protect individual initiative when institutional resources proved inadequate, while maintaining command authority and organizational discipline through clear guidelines about when exceptional circumstances justified exceptional individual response. New protocols will provide legal protection for individual initiative that exceeds assigned authority when lives are at stake and official resources prove insufficient, Bradley explained while establishing procedures that balanced individual moral responsibility with institutional requirements for command authority and procedural compliance. Master Chief Ward addressed the formation with senior enlisted perspective that acknowledged how Sophia's achievement had challenged assumptions about individual potential while demonstrating that comprehensive capability could exist outside traditional recognition and development channels. Sergeant Carpenter's rescue mission proves that individual excellence can exceed institutional assumptions when comprehensive preparation meets moral determination, Ward observed, while acknowledging that her example would encourage other personnel to develop capabilities beyond assigned requirements. Her success demonstrates that institutional effectiveness requires better recognition and utilization of individual potential that exists outside traditional evaluation procedures. Staff Sergeant Shaw received recognition for communication support that had enabled unauthorized success while demonstrating institutional loyalty that transcended bureaucratic procedures when individual moral responsibility conflicted with established authority structures. Staff Sergeant Shaw's communication support for unauthorized operations demonstrated professional courage in supporting individual initiative when institutional resources proved inadequate. Hunt acknowledged while recognizing that effective military operations sometimes required support for exceptional individual action that exceeded official approval. The ceremony concluded with institutional commitment to policy changes that would prevent future situations where individual capability was constrained by evaluation procedures that failed to recognize comprehensive competence. Sophia's unauthorized rescue had become catalyst for organizational development that would affect every soldier whose potential exceeded traditional assumptions. This ceremony establishes precedents that will guide future policy development designed to identify and utilize individual capabilities that exceed traditional specialty boundaries, General Williams announced while committing institutional resources to comprehensive capability development. Sergeant Carpenter's example will inspire systematic changes that encourage rather than constrain individual preparation for scenarios that official training doesn't anticipate. Sophia's response to recognition reflected exhaustion that had evolved into professional satisfaction with institutional changes that her moral courage had prompted. Her unauthorized rescue had achieved more than saving 5 lives by forcing organizational acknowledgement of individual potential that traditional procedures had failed to recognize. Thank you for this recognition, but the most important outcome of this situation is the institutional changes that will prevent future constraints on individual capability when lives are at stake, Sophia observed while acknowledging that her achievement had transcended personal recognition to create systematic improvement. Military effectiveness requires utilizing individual potential wherever it exists, rather than constraining it within artificial boundaries that prevent effective action. The months following the recognition ceremony demonstrated lasting institutional changes that affected personnel development throughout the command structure. Sophia's example had created cultural shift that encouraged comprehensive individual preparation while maintaining organizational discipline through clear guidelines about individual initiative and institutional authority. Personnel evaluation procedures incorporated assessment of tactical thinking, medical competence, and leadership potential regardless of assigned specialties, while creating advancement opportunities that recognize demonstrated capability rather than traditional career progression. Individual development was encouraged, rather than constrained when preparation exceeded assigned requirements. Training programs expanded to include cross-functional competency development that prepared personnel for scenarios requiring integrated capabilities rather than narrow specialization. Sophia's rescue mission had demonstrated that complex situations often required comprehensive competence that traditional training boundaries prevented from developing. Medical personnel received tactical training, while tactical personnel developed medical competencies that prepared them for situations where specialty boundaries became artificial constraints on effective action. The integration reflected institutional recognition that combat conditions often required capabilities that exceeded traditional role limitations. Sophia's advancement to senior non-commissioned officer reflected institutional recognition of leadership capabilities that her rescue mission had demonstrated, while creating precedents for personnel whose comprehensive competence exceeded traditional specialty boundaries. Her example encouraged other soldiers to develop capabilities beyond assigned requirements. The memorial wall at Forward Operating Base Sentinel that had been prepared to include Sophia's name among presumed casualties instead displayed commendation that honored her rescue mission while acknowledging institutional failure to recognize individual potential that unauthorized preparation had developed. Burke, Glenn, Stone, Boyd, and Walsh completed their recovery while maintaining careers that had been preserved through individual intervention when institutional resources proved inadequate. Their survival represented vindication of moral courage that had exceeded official authority to accomplish missions that proper channels couldn't complete. The legacy of Sophia's unauthorized rescue extended beyond individual recognition to institutional evolution that encouraged comprehensive individual development while maintaining organizational effectiveness through balanced policies that recognized both individual potential and command authority requirements. Forward Operating Base Sentinel became model installation for capability assessment and development that identified individual competencies exceeding traditional boundaries while creating advancement opportunities based on demonstrated excellence rather than bureaucratic compliance. Sophia's example had transformed institutional culture in ways that affected every soldier whose potential had been constrained by artificial limitations. Her story became institutional memory that proved individual moral courage could challenge organizational assumptions while prompting systematic changes that improved military effectiveness. The woman who had been deemed too small for operational duties had led the most important operation of all, transforming how an entire institution understood the relationship between individual capability and collective effectiveness. Years later, personnel throughout the military would reference Sophia's rescue mission as demonstration that exceptional circumstances required exceptional individual response, that comprehensive preparation should be encouraged rather than constrained, and that institutional effectiveness depended on recognizing and utilizing individual potential wherever it existed rather than limiting it within artificial boundaries that prevented soldiers from accomplishing missions that moral responsibility demanded and individual capability could achieve. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.